To the combined meeting. Today, as the meeting is a combined meeting of all scrutiny committees, please can I ask for the nomination and seconder for the chair for the meeting. It's been suggested that the chair of SOC 1 be nominated to chair the first session, scrutinising the MTFS for education and family support, and the chair of SOC 3 be nominated to chair the second session, scrutinising the MTFS for communities. Thank you.
Nominate Councillor Gifford.
Yeah, I think I can second that. I'll second that.
Would you like to take the chair?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Right. Okay, so I'll just go through the usual statement, so please bear with me. Welcome then to all members and officers of this combined meeting of all scrutiny committees, which due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing will be held virtually, with committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting has been recorded and will be available via the council's website to be viewed subsequently. Please can everyone ensure that all mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode, and members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda on Thursday the 14th of January 2021. Still haven't got used to saying 21 yet. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that, with the exception of myself as a chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary can mute those not being used. If any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should please, in the instant messaging icon, IM, in the bottom left of the Skype window, type speak, and I will come to the order I receive requests. Please do not use the instant messaging chat to enter questions or comments. So I'll now ask the Scrutiny Officer to announce the names of the councillors in attendance, please, at this meeting. And officers are asked to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak. They should also ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. So can I ask the Scrutiny Officer, then, please, to announce the members in attendance?
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Manager, and I shall now announce the list of members of the committee who are in attendance. So firstly, we have Canon Reverend Edward Evans, Councillor Alex Williams, Councillor Hussain, Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Cheryl Green, Councillor David Lewis, Councillor Gareth Howells, Councillor Jane Gebby, Councillor Spanswick, Councillor Blundell, Councillor Julia Williams, Councillor Kay Rowlands, Mr Mayor, Councillor Ken Watts, Councillor Lynn Walters, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Mike Clark, Councillor Kern, Councillor Nora Clark, Councillor Pam Davis, Councillor Paul Davis, Councillor Richard Collins, Councillor Richard Young, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Sturman, and Councillor Beadle. We also have Mrs Lindsay Morris, who is one of the registered representatives here as well, and we have cabinet members Councillor Patel, Councillor Smith, Councillor Young, and that's it, I believe, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And can I ask for any apologies then for absence? Have we received any, Merrill or Andrew? Oh, we've forgotten Councillor Peniel Thomas. I'm surprised that was the most important one there. So yeah, Councillor Ross Peniel Thomas is here as well. But yes. Sorry, go on. Any apologies for absence?
Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillors Bridie Sedgbeer, Elaine Venables, Carolyn Webster, and we have a notice from Councillor Tim Thomas that he may be able to make the meeting later, but he can't be here from the start.
And Chair, we also have apologies from Councillor Stuart Baldwin and Councillor David White.
Okay, Nora Clark, please.
Yes, I wanted to give Councillor Venables his apologies, but apparently they've been given. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I come in, Chair? Sorry, I'll be leaving the meeting at 11:30. I got another meeting to attend.
Okay, no problem. Just for the record, Councillor Nicole Burnett is here as well. And I can see Councillor John Paul Blundell would like to come in as well.
It's all right, Chair. Councillor Gareth Howells beat me to it.
Okay. Okay, and then Lindsay then got apologies to Nick Janus as well. So I think that's everyone. There's no more apologies. Okay. Item 3 then is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If so, can you please type speak in the chat? Give it 10 seconds. No, okay. All right, then item 4.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, go on.
I did write speak, but it's probably just gone the same way.
Sorry, I assumed that was the previous. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I should have put something different in. I know it. As it's school's budget today, I feel I should declare an interest that I am a community governor of Kevin Glass Infants. I am a community governor.
Okay.
Yeah. In that case, then I need to declare a community governor of Brinturion Comprehensive School.
Chair, I'd have to declare interest as my LA governor at Caira Primary and at Nant Fashlan Primary. Thank you.
Okay. I know not everyone.
I'm a parent governor at my state comprehensive as well. Then.
Just so I was just about to say, Alex. Just so we don't go through quickly declaring all the governorships. What we've done historically on SOC 1 in the past is anyone who's an LEA governor, I think the advice has been they do not need to declare, whereas community governors, perhaps it might be wise to do so. But I'm sure there are people wiser than me that can confirm or deny that advice, Meryl or Andrew.
Yes, Chair, that's the position we've held previously.
Brilliant. Okay, Councillor Green. Oh, withdrawn. Okay, brilliant. I'll take that as all then for item 3. Okay, item 4 then is the medium-term financial strategy 2021-2 to 24-5. So can I ask then the interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, please, to present this report?
Thank you, Chair. I will go through very briefly because those of you who were at Cabinet yesterday will have heard the presentation. So I'll keep it as brief as I can, but nevertheless, it is an important document that you have in front of you. So just to remind you, the medium-term financial strategy supports the 3 wellbeing objectives and identifies obviously the resource priorities for the next 4 years. So the MTFS covers the 4-year period 21-22 to 24-25. I think it's really important in this MTFS to note the impact of COVID, and in particular the additional cost pressures and loss of income that's ensued from the pandemic. We have been particularly successful in getting money from the hardship fund that the Welsh Government set up with money that obviously came as consequentials from Westminster, and that has helped us immensely, as you will see, I think, from the Q3 budget monitoring. But longer term, for you as members, you'll be in a position to restart, recover and renew services, and obviously we don't know how much disruption there will be in the future going forward. So there are still challenges obviously in the MPFS. It's more uncertain than usual going forward. COVID, Brexit, all sorts of other pressures. If I just mention loss of income, car parking, leisure's never likely to return by the 1st of April next year. It'll be at least a couple of years before that really gets back, if it ever goes back to how it was. Rental holidays, council tax reduction scheme, a huge increase obviously in universal credit claimants, and new rules on homelessness, TTP, PPE, all these acronyms. I don't think anybody knew what PPE was some some time ago, vaccination, social care, and indeed education, which we'll be talking about in a minute. So very much more challenging than usual. The last 10 years savings have been 65 million. I blink every time I look at that, 25% of the council's budget. So we are quite a lean, efficient council now, and the difficulty will be finding more savings going forward. And if you look at the tables in the MTFS, you'll see that we will still be looking for significant savings in the 4-year period, and most of which have not yet been identified. So that's an issue really for COSC today in terms of the future savings. So wherever possible, obviously the MTFS brings in savings and tries to minimise the effect on services, efficiency savings, property savings, service savings. From 412 to 417 in the report, you can see those opportunities. And I should say, just to remind you, that obviously the MTFS is set within the economic public plans, Welsh Government and legislation. So there are rules and regulations around what we can do, what we get, and how we put this together. And what you've got in front of you obviously includes the principles governing the strategy. You've also got the capital programme included in there from 2021 to 3031, along with the associated Treasury Management Strategy. So the economic context is set out in 423, which sets out how the money comes from central government, how it's deployed in Wales, and then how that comes into Bridgend through a variety of areas. The settlement, the draft settlement, which we had on the 22nd of December, you all will have heard me say that it was late this year, is around 3.8% across Wales, with quite significant variation. I have to say, some councils were down in the 2% and others were a little bit higher. So significant variation coming through in those rates of rate support grants, but much better settlement than anticipated. Bridgend was a net winner in that, and we had a settlement of 4.3% as a draft. Obviously, we're hoping that there'll be very little change between that and the final settlement. So in terms of capital, the provisional settlement gives us £8 million of capital funding for 21-22, and there's very little movement in the settlement from previous years. There's a reduction in the Sustainable Waste Management grants, childcare offer, and the Transformation Fund, and that's significant, the Transformation Fund, with our partners in health. And that's an increase in social care workforce and a minority ethnic gypsy travellers learner grant. There'll also be 766 million from the consequentials from the Chancellor's spending review, and we're not obviously sure how much of that will come local government's way, but obviously hold out some hope. So very briefly, 4.7 sets out the current financial position, which is set out in the Q3 budget monitoring report. 4.8 sets out the development of the MTFS. 4.9 sets out the principles, and you'll recall that there are 13 of those, and those of you who are on BREP will be extremely familiar with the principles governing the MTFS. 4.10 sets out the assumption on council tax, an increase of 3.9%, lower than the 4.5 that was estimated, and which we modelled previous settlements and previous budgets on. But going forward, obviously, a hugely challenging arena. 4.11 to 4.12 sets out the resource envelope and risks, and 4.13 shows what I said earlier, that 22 million of savings are still likely to be required over the MTFS period. And you'll see from table 4 that it's not blank, but it's certainly not a great picture in terms of identifying those £22 million worth of savings. And I think it's fair to say that there's often quite a lead in time to those, so that's a significant issue. So table 6 shows you the draft revenue budget for 21-22. The assumptions on pay and prices are not yet clear. As you will know, there was an announcement that there would be no pay increase, and then an announcement that there would be some sort of pay increase. Very, very difficult. The uncertainty is stamped right across the NTFS and the budget, I think, for the future. And obviously significant pressures on schools, which we're going to talk about, schools' budgets, on ALN, COVID, and all sorts of other areas. So the budget reduction proposals for 21-22 that COSC will be particularly interested in are identified at Appendix B, 1.7 million of them. And then at 423, just to remind you that the council fund is maintained at 5% of the council's net budget, excluding schools, and that's obviously something that we've aimed to get to and want to preserve. So that was all really I wanted to say. The capital funding is set out in table 8, and happy to take, obviously, along with my fellow colleagues, any detailed questions. Deb Exton is on the call as well today, and obviously we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Jill. Right, so what I'm just going to do very briefly, it's just been a bit of discussion in the chat. I'll just go back temporarily before we ask any questions to item 3 so that further declarations can just be made on the record. So I know that Neil Clode would like to come in.
Hi, it's not so much would like to come in, just to say that I'm here, that was all. I didn't know whether or not we were announced, that was all. And if that's all fine, then that's all fine.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, you've got all the attendees and everything, Andrew, just to check, yeah. Because I knew you read out a list of members. I just wanted to make sure you had everybody on the record as being here.
Yes, Chair, we do. We're aware that the Chair and Vice of the Schools Budget Forum is here as well in attendance.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, okay, so going back then to this, obviously I'm very happy to take questions. For those that were not in the members pre-meeting earlier, just to reiterate very quickly, how we're going to approach this is obviously this is the session on the Education and Family Support Directorate. There is obviously the Communities one to follow this, and then the other 2 directorates tomorrow. So what I was proposing to do was to go through Appendix A, which is on pages 39 to 41st, and then Appendix B on pages 41 to 42. So what I wanted to do was go kind of line by line, if you like, through Appendix A and B. And I know members have indicated they wish to ask questions on some of those topics and some of those budget pressures and savings proposals. So I'll take those questions as they come. Obviously, if there is something as a supplementary whilst we're on a topic that you want to come in on, obviously please type speak in the chat. There will obviously, as Jill kind of alluded to, there will be other matters that kind of don't fit very neatly into them, whether it be budget questions or things that cross directorates, and I'll take those at the end. So first of all, then, let me go into Appendix A for Education and Family Support on page 39. And you can see there ESF 1 through to 7, if everybody's following me on the pages. So are there any questions any members would like to raise on the first couple of points there, ESF 1 through 4? Councillor Gebby?
Thank you, Chair. Jill, I've heard you speak many, many times, and I know that we've had various discussions across different committees. I'd just like to challenge your use of savings, because we're not saving anything. We're actually trying to make cuts to services. That's what we're trying to do, because we haven't got a budget that doesn't come down in consequentials. So we can have that political debate, but I don't think that's worthwhile. But we're not making savings, definitely not. We're still making cuts.
Okay. Does anybody want to come in then on Appendix A ESF 1 through 4. I've got a request for number 5, but I thought I'd check 1 through 4 first. No. Okay, then. ESF 5, then. I know Councillor Green wants to come in on the ASD Learning Resource Centre.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's on EFS 5. There's a reference there to the autistic spectrum disorder children, and I would just like to ask the Director and Cabinet Member, as change has a very detrimental effect on autistic children, what has been the experience with this pandemic and how badly or not have these children been affected? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Thanks, Chair. Just to check that you can hear me, first of all, because I'm having connection difficulties this morning.
Yeah, hear you fine.
Thanks, Chair. So for the purpose of the recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support. On 5, I think one thing that we would point out, first of all, is we're very proud in Bridgend that we've established a number of settings to support the needs of learners with ASD, and not just in English medium settings, but also in Welsh medium settings, and it's something that we are very proud of. The question that Councillor Green asks is with regard to, over the last 9 months, how has the pandemic affected some learners with additional learning needs, specifically around those with autistic spectrum disorder? I think it's fair to say that the last 10 months has been deeply challenging for all sorts of learners, those with additional learning needs and those in mainstream settings. The one thing I would certainly praise schools on, first of all, is the phenomenal efforts that they've put in place to make sure that they've not been affected. So, for example, I can recall just before Christmas I visited a few schools, and in the classrooms themselves, obviously there's a different regime with regard to health and safety in schools at the moment. But if you could see the learners within those settings, the ones I observed were very happy, very settled, and obviously appreciating the support and the normality that school staff had put in place. So first of all, I just want to reflect upon the fact that what schools are offering at the moment is phenomenal, and a big hats off to school staff to do that. As far as additional support from the local authority, as far as this is concerned, it takes probably 3 different avenues. The first avenue is support in schools. So within the inclusion service, we will be supporting staff to make sure that the additional support is there within classroom settings. We also provide then within specific support settings within schools, within learning resource centres, additional support from learning support staff and also staff within the school. Additional then bespoke settings within our special school environment to provide this. Now, it's not just in school, of course, it's also providing support for families as well. So when learners are not necessarily on site and providing on-site provision, we also provide families with support. And from the feedback we've had, that's been pretty successful. So I think it has impacted Councillor Green inevitably, but from the efforts of school staff and inclusion staff in particular, we've certainly aimed to mitigate any risk to learners' well-being.
Okay, I know the Cabinet Member also wants to come in and answer this one, so can I ask Councillor Smith to come in as well, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can't pass this opportunity to say thank you to the relevant staff, as Lindsay has just done. As we know, every autistic person is different, and we mustn't make generalizations. I know this only too well. I've got a little grandson, aged 10, who is in a special school setting. He's very high functioning, but in his case, and I think that is shared by many autistic young people, change isn't welcome. Once a timetable is set, they like to stick to the timetable, and it can be upsetting if the timetable is changed. And what I know of our special schools and our settings in mainstream schools is that the staff we've got are firstly expert in the fields, in fact cutting edge, and also extremely dedicated. We worry about the welfare of these young people, but I do worry about the welfare of people like, for example, the head teacher of Heron's Bridge. I'm worried they're not getting enough sleep, and I'm worried they're not getting enough time to themselves. So they are extremely dedicated, and that dedication has been recognised by Estin. Lindsay, at my request, has emailed all elected members with a letter from Estin. We understood they were coming in to look specifically at the PRU, but when we were interviewed by the Estin inspectors, it was a much more general view. They got a very general impression of what Education Bridgend is all about, and they were very, very supportive of the Team Bridgend approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Charles. Cheryl, did you want to come back? Were you happy?
No, thank you. That was quite reassuring, Chair. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Cheryl, for that very important question.
Brilliant. Okay. Was there anyone else wanted to come in on EFS 5 then before I move on? Okay, take that as a no. So EFS 6, I got Councillor Spanswick wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the EFS 6, the proposed or projected increase in pupil numbers, demographic growth and local development plan impact. Accept that that may well be a valid case, but there's 903,000 this year and a recurring of over £1 million in future years. I just wondered how that figure has been calculated, and is it a percentage of a budget, and how is it split across education? Where does it go altogether? Is it just for schools? Is there support services in there? And on the local development plan impact, that means additional houses. Additional houses brings in additional council tax, which Joe Public always go on about. Why are we raising? So I'm just interested to know the detail behind that figure of nearly £1 million and over £1 million in future years, how it's calculated, and where will it be used across different service areas within education.
Yeah, and who did you want to answer that, John?
Director of Education.
Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Spanswick. I'll need to defer to finance colleagues for the calculation, I'm afraid. Jill?
Deb, do you want to come in on this one? Because I know you've been involved in it.
Yes, thanks, Jill. For the recording, Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance. What we do is we collect pupil numbers from all schools during the financial year. We collect them at a couple of points in time, and we also collect predictions of estimated pupil numbers for future years. So we forward plan in a sense in terms of how it will affect the pupil numbers in total primary school numbers, total secondary school numbers. So it's based upon projections from schools themselves. Obviously that changes as we go through the years, and we obviously update those figures as we go. It's also based upon the age-weighted pupil unit, which we use to fund schools. So it's a combination of the numbers and the funding per age group. It is all related to school delegated budgets. Obviously, if there are significant increases, there may be an impact as well upon support services provided to schools, but this is funding strictly for the schools themselves, because obviously because of the class sizes and class size limits, any increase in numbers impacts upon the number of teachers and support staff that they need. So it is based on quite detailed calculations from the schools, and obviously our own data from Lindsay's team has a data kind of units that provides a lot of projections going forward as well. So in terms of your comment about the LDP and the impact on houses and obviously the funding that we get for that always works through a couple of years later. So we don't get the funding in our settlement until a couple of years after those pupil numbers have actually gone to school and been registered and gone on to the PLASC data forms.
Okay, thanks. John, did you want to come back?
No, thanks. I just want to make sure so it is clear it goes 100% to schools directly, because a couple of people don't automatically increase the numbers of staff. So it'd be interesting to see how that works out. But it is clear now that it goes direct to schools.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely goes direct to schools. We obviously then, in terms of how we calculate the formula allocations for schools and for individual schools, we allocate that down to specific schools where there are increased pupil numbers then. So if your school numbers haven't gone up, then you wouldn't anticipate getting any of that additional funding. It's only in those areas where the pupil numbers have actually risen.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to come in on EFS 6? I think that is a no. EFS 7 then, anyone? Home school transport?
Chair?
Yeah, John? John?
Yeah, Eric, EFS 7, the school transport, I know this relates to additional vehicles and those with additional learning needs, and nothing against that, but it's a one-off pressure whilst the review is undertaken. And the whole topic of integrated transport and reviewing how we deal with our transport, both home to school transport and all other transport in BTBC, has been on the agenda for years. I'm just a bit concerned seeing this year as a one-off pressure, 1.2 million. I'm wondering what's happening with the review. And will it really happen, and how's that money going to be spent?
Lindsay, do you want to pick this up to start with, or do you want me to pick it up?
More than happy to come in, Jill, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Spanswick. So just to recap on where we are with the homeschool transport activity, first of all, is you will recall back in the autumn term is that we've been asked now to defer decisions around this until the end of March. I think this is a sensible decision because the Welsh Government are undertaking a review of learner travel and they will report back in a few months' time. So again, a lot of the work that they are doing will certainly support our activity in this area. One of the things that we are doing currently, there's a significant amount of work around contract management to drive down this cost. So, for example, if we look at the tenders to homeschool transport companies, we've recently retendered over 240 contracts. We hope that the savings will come out of this. So I think there's a number of concurrent activities in play. The Welsh Government one, the significant amount of work that we are doing with regard to retendering contracts, and also looking at the wider domain around the use of council assets to obviously help schools. So from a school's perspective, that's where we are. Jill, on a more corporate one, with the Chair's permission, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah.
Okay. This has been a significant concern for a number of years. As you know, it's raised constantly in the budget monitoring report that we're overspent, and as Lindsay knows, that's not a comfortable position to be in. So there was a consultation that was reported back to Cabinet. The decision to remove transport from those who aren't entitled has been deferred pending the review of by the Welsh Government, and so that's why we've put in a one-off pressure to tide us over until Cabinet are able to review that again. So it's been put in just for 1 year.
Okay. Did you want to come back, John?
Okay, thanks, Chair. It's complicated.
Yeah, quite. Councillor Amanda Williams, then, please, on this.
Hi, thanks. Apologies, I'm going to keep my camera off because I've got 3 children homeschooling in the background. One who's actually having a live cookery lesson, so I don't want him running in with something on fire for you all to see. My one, I raise it every year, is about the children who we're paying for transport to school because there's no safe routes to school. And I think that needs to be included in here. And I ask every year, can we have a review? Because it doesn't seem to be any joint up thinking. We need to be looking at these areas, and I bang on all the time about everything in Coity, that there are children getting a bus because they don't have a small section of pavement. And if those sorts of things were looked at as a whole, as a one council approach with communities, because there is funding available from Welsh Government for safe routes to school, there's a potential saving there for these children, because at the moment we're throwing all this money into a black hole and we're going to be paying for this transport forever unless we resolve the problem. So I think we need to be looking at where we can save on these children as well, please.
Okay, Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. First of all, Councillor Williams, congratulate you on your homeschooling efforts. I'm sure it's enriching for your children, so thank you for your efforts, and I mean that in all sincerity. With regard to the issues around learner travel, the report we took to Cabinet last year obviously touched upon the safe travel to school and also the use of transport to other schools. Now, clearly, Welsh Government are going to be looking at that as part of their learn and travel, so we'll wait to see what comes out of that report. But just to assure Councillor Williams and other committee members, the safe routes to school is certainly something that we are looking at as far as the directorate and wider across the organisation. The other thing that we are looking at, and again, Councillor Williams is absolutely right, we are challenged by Councillor Williams and other elected members with regard to learners not getting into their first choice school and having to be transferred to other schools via school transport, and then obviously putting additional pressure on that budget. You know, we have undertaken a review of this over the last year, and one of the things I can confirm is that the numbers that are not reaching their first choice schools are extremely low, certainly less than 1%. But one of the things that obviously with Coity in particular, there is a pressure on that area in Bridgend with regard to pupil admissions, and hence the reason within our Band B proposals we are looking to address that. So Councillor Williams, absolutely we are looking at the safe routes to school, and it is featuring within our thing in learn and travel.
Did you want to come back, Amanda?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, looks like Ross Pennell Thomas wants to come in, making me go backwards in the agenda, but EFS 6.
And just keeping you on your toes, Chair, but thanks very much. Can I just associate myself with the comments earlier on from the Cabinet member and the director, just to thank school staff. Being married to a teacher, I absolutely understand the pressure that's on at the moment, and where teachers really want to be is at the front of the classroom teaching children. So and that's absolutely where I want him to be as well. Just on ESF 6, I wonder if the director can just explain. Obviously, my understanding is that the policy at the moment in Welsh Government is that there's very little flexibility into pupil numbers when we are building new schools. There are some significant budget pressures forthcoming in the coming years. And the lack of flexibility from Welsh Government when we are building new schools is why we are where we are in terms of Coity Primary bursting at the seams. I'm just wondering what conversations are being had between local authorities and Welsh Government to allow that flexibility in future years. I think it really will help with those budget pressures, but unless we get that flexibility, we're going to continue to be building new schools across the county borough, indeed across Wales, whereby they're almost not fit for purpose by the time the doors are open. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell-Thomas. Thank you, Chair. You're absolutely right with regard to the local authority being bound by Welsh Government policy, regulations and guidance. That is absolutely the case. Where we're lucky in Bridgend, obviously we've got a very mature school modernisation team who are expert in dealing with this policy and delivering. One of the challenges we have, of course, is we are bound by that policy. And one of the issues that's certainly been flagged up by elected members recently is with regard to sustainability, making the schools large enough so they cope with additional demand and also meet the requirement to meet the code. The other challenge we've got, of course, is the transitory nature of families moving in and out of areas and coping with that demand. So there are challenges on it, but obviously, just to be assured from a statutory point of view, we are following the code and the associated guidance. With regard to the question, are we communicating this to Welsh Government officials? Yes. And not just to Welsh Government officials, but also within the ADU community, the Association of Directors of Education in Wales. This is certainly something that has been picked up not just by ourselves, but by other local authorities. But what I'm very happy to do, Councillor Pennell-Thomas, is to again raise this with Welsh Government when we meet with them next week. I would be more than happy then through Democratic Services to provide an update.
Okay, and I know Councillor Smith wants to come in as well.
Just a quick addendum to that, just to point out that it's not just with new schools that we are not allowed to operate with spare capacity, it's also with existing schools. And we would like a little bit of spare capacity to cope with people who move schools during term time. But at the moment, Welsh Government doesn't allow us that little bit of flexibility.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Do you want to come back, Ross?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much, Director.
Brilliant. And I can see in the chat, Lindsay, Councillor Hussain wants assurances you won't forget about Pen y Fe, and I'm sure that you wouldn't even if you tried.
I'm happy to provide those assurances, Chair, Councillor Hussain.
There we are. Okay, we're on Appendix B then. I'm going to move forward to Appendix B, which is pages 41 and 42 of your agenda. And obviously, as we did with Appendix A, I'm going to work through these in order. Now, I've got EFS 1 down as Councillor Spanswick, but you may have already asked that, John, on the previous question you asked, or?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I've sorted, but if I could add EFS 2 as well.
Yeah, just quickly then, there's nobody else that wants to come in on EFS 1 then before I move forward to EFS 2? No, okay, John, go on, take over then EFS 2.
Just quickly on EFS 1 though, it is read and there's a question about how realistic that saving can be achieved, and it's the same with, well, EFS 1 and EFS 2. So the question is on EFS 2, and it's the bottom part of the paragraph, but the impact, and it talks about health and safety risk likely to increase and will need to be mitigated in other ways. So I'd like some reassurance for that, because health and safety and school transport, we've had issues in the past, and we need to be 100% sure that it is mitigated. So I'd like to understand how that is going to work, because it's red and it worries me.
Lindsay?
Thanks, Councillor Spanswick. Thanks, Chair. First of all, you're absolutely right. Health and safety is paramount concern, and you would expect this from your corporate director, who's got responsibility for corporate health and safety. Obviously, this is absolutely top priority within the directorate and across the organisation. So as you can see, both of those are currently red. It's to do with the fact that neither of these have been taken forward by Cabinet for the reasons that you have pointed out. And what we've been asked to do now over the next couple of months really is to look at whether these mitigating measures can be in place. If we can't put sufficient mitigating measures in place, well, obviously those savings won't go ahead, because obviously health and safety will be our top priority. Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Spanswick.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's great. Thanks.
Okay. I've also got Councillor Lynn Walters on this one.
Thank you, Chair. And I must say, Lindsay, that your previous comment then just fills me with horror, because this item has been on the MTFS for the last 3 years. Every year we have the same concerns raised on this MTFS review about health and safety, negative media, opposition from stakeholders and media coverage. So from your comments, we've even though it's been on the MTFS for the last 3 years, we're now just going to do a review in the next couple of months. So why hasn't the review been done previously? Why do we think it's deliverable this year? Why do we think that's changed? It's just not good enough.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Walters. First of all, let me just reassure you on some of the areas there. First of all, we have undertaken a review. The next couple of months, we're looking at what has come out of that review and how we can put some of the recommendations into practice. So clearly, one of the things that we are trying to do is to make sure, and this is a pivotal concern, that all of these are, first of all, safe for learners to travel on. Obviously, you would expect us to assure you of that, and we will give you the full commitment to it. But clearly, there are other ways of doing things that are equally as safe. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to look at different ways of doing things to provide the same level of health and safety for travellers, and also making sure that we can do them within the budget envelope.
Do you want to come back, Lynn?
Yeah, it's I'm, you know, it really builds on Councillor Amanda Williams' comments previously about safe routes, for safe transport routes. As I say, I wait to be convinced that we are actually going to achieve this saving, because it has been here for so long, the proposal, and it seems to keep going on the too difficult to do pile, but I don't expect any other answer at this moment. Thank you.
Okay. Did you? Okay, we'll leave that on there. EFS 3 then. I've got Councillor Gebby who wants to ask a question.
I did. Thank you, Chair. Lindsay, I am really concerned, and Chair, please allow me a bit of latitude, because I've been sitting here reading since we had our pre-meet this morning. EFS 2, EFS 3, EFS 4, EFS 6, all of them make reference to vulnerable groups of our children. So the reality for me is that is not going to be equal and fair. That will not be prosperous for our children that actually need it. And I notice in the report that we go on to talk about an equality impact assessment that will be undertaken at a later date. That should be done now. If we're talking about savings, I want to see the equality impact assessment for each one now. Otherwise, how can we make any recommendations, because we don't understand what the impact is going to be? And the other thing I'd like to ask is, all of these are related to children. So please tell me where the children's rights assessment is in relation to this. Thank you very much.
Okay, Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Gebby. First of all, with all the areas of saving, these are tough. They're tough measures, as I'm sure members will appreciate. What we've tried to do.
They're not savings, Lindsay. Please, I apologise. They are not savings. They are cuts to services.
Thanks, Councillor Gebby. So, as far as where we are aiming to change practice, is we're looking to mitigate any risk on frontline delivery. So wherever possible, if we can change the practice, we're looking at changing management, we're looking at changing the processes around supporting these learners. So there's a very clear focus on whenever savings or cuts are going to be made, we look to, wherever possible, not make them affect learners who are benefiting from frontline services. So I think that's a guiding principle that we have adopted, certainly within education and other directorates. But again, they are difficult, and I'm not going to hide away from the fact that all of the areas that we've identified within this report, none of them are easy, and they are challenged. And of course, by the RAG status we've indicated here, we've indicated whether or not they are doable or whether we see them as being very difficult to achieve.
Okay, do you want to come back, Jane?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I'm just really concerned that we are talking about reducing services to the most vulnerable in our community. We talk about sustainability. I appreciate you're talking about the management structure, Lindsay, but who's going to take those responsibilities on in your management structure that isn't already overstretched? Because you talk later on about having a different structure, but somebody's got to do this work. Public service workers are under dire pressures at the minute, so I fully appreciate all the pressures that your staff are under at the minute, but I don't think we're helping them, and we're talking about making further cuts to their services. And I don't think we understand the implications. So you're asking us to discuss something that we don't understand the implications of. I don't know how that reduction is going to look, and I don't know what it's going to transfer to on the front line.
Thanks, Councillor Gebby. If I just come in there, Chair, I think a key element of what Councillor Gebby just said is the notion of the equality impact assessment. And of course, with these, we would undertake equality impact assessments where required. And again, I would be more than happy to talk through those with members in due course.
Okay, I've got a couple further members that want to come in on this item. So can I ask Councillor Rod Shaw to come in next, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I echo Councillor Gebby's concerns. I am really concerned about these issues. But to me, frankly, the obvious solution comes further down on SCH1, where we've put off for years the 1% efficiency figure, and we've put it down on this one on the next page as a £1 million. Well, it's ranked amber. But if we're asking schools to provide a 1% efficiency saving, should that saving not go to central services so that central services are there to support the schools?
Lindsay?
Thanks, Councillor Shaw. Thanks, Chair. I certainly understand the question. I think the challenge we're all in is we're all serving the same ecosystem. So schools are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis with regards to the budget. Certainly the local authority and central support services face the same challenges. One thing we have in Bridgend, which we're very proud of, is the Team Bridgend approach, where obviously officers and schools are working very closely together to deliver the best possible outcome for children and young people. So we work very closely with Schools Budget Forum to make sure that any changes in the budget doesn't adversely affect our young people in any way. But it is difficult, and I think you're right to say that it is challenging from a central services point of view. One statistic that is interesting from Bridgend is we run a very lean central service. So with regard to the amount of money spent centrally per learner, it's below the Welsh average. So we keep a very lean service run centrally to support schools. And I think the decision has been made over many years to prioritise school budget and protect them. And certainly over the next couple of years, it's going to be a bumpy road, I suspect, for schools and local authorities to maintain service delivery. So it is an ecosystem, Councillor Shaw. I know you appreciate that. And again, I appreciate the support you've given to make sure those central services are running effectively too.
Okay. Did you want to come back, Rod?
Well, just briefly, if I may. Yeah, Lindsay, you aren't, as you well know, I'm very aware of the lean team, as you describe it, on central services, and the key work they do in supporting all our schools in Bridgend. It just seems a bit of anathema then to take services away from that point and expect schools individually, 56 individual schools, to try and take up that slack when they're under pressure as well. But what is the purpose of the efficiency saving if it's not to try and provide more central services to more effectively support schools? It's as simple as that. So can you explain where that £1 million a year will go if it is not for schools in one way or another?
I think looking at the general budget position, Councillor Shaw, obviously we are part of a much bigger domain across the council. So we need to make sure that the general council budget is fit for purpose. And clearly there's areas within our directorate and within communities, as we'll talk about shortly, where we need to make sure that we look at a one council approach to all our budgets. So it is a challenge. I am mindful that, again, I'm one of several directorates that are all looking to support children and young people. But ultimately, we need to make sure that our budget is a balanced one. So that is a corporate responsibility, obviously, as a director. But on the same token, I need to make sure that the service delivery within my directorate is effective as well. So again, going back to the ecosystem notion, it is a one that we need to be very careful about how we balance and preserve those best possible services for all residents of Bridgend.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. I can see that Councillor Penhill-Thomas also wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. With your permission, two very quick questions from me, and if I take them both now, you'll not have to invite me in again. So EFS 2, can we have a figure, please? I think it's really useful to have a figure on the number of services that will be affected by this. How many bus services are we talking that will no longer have an escort on them? And EFS 7, well, I appreciate it's not next year's cut, it's the following year. I really would like to think that we are reviewing that cut in light of everything that's happened this year, in 2020 and going forward this year. The equality impact and the psychological impact of coronavirus on children is as yet unknown, but I think we can say anecdotally it's absolutely massive. And I speak to teachers, I'm a governor myself, and the impact on the most disadvantaged children in the county borough is a primary concern, I think. So I really would like to think that that's a saving or a cut that we are reconsidering in light of what is likely to be a really significant impact on pupils going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Penhill-Thomas. Chair, if I may, first of all, with regard to the actual number of routes and contracts, I don't have that information at hand, but I'm more than happy to find that out from the school transport team and sharing that. So I'll certainly do that. The second point is well made, Councillor Penhill-Thomas. There's two issues for me, really. First of all, the obvious impact that the pandemic has had on young people and staff, by the way, which has been challenging. But also, we're in the development and implementation phase shortly of the new ALN and Education Tribunal Bill. So part of that we'll need to see what comes out of that legislation to determine exactly what inclusion staff we need in situ to deliver it. We are looking at different delivery methods, which I have reported previously to Scrutiny with regard to a regional service. So that doesn't negate what we are doing centrally. It'll be the same team, but also working with partners across the Clontarf-Magnog region and indeed across Central South to make sure that we support each other from a business resilience point of view. So certainly from that angle, it will be, as we've identified within the MTFS, these proposals are not currently fully developed and they will involve some delivery risk if they go ahead. But I think the point you've made around supporting the individuals, especially those that are vulnerable, is a really key point.
Okay, do you want to come back, Ross?
No, that's fine, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Thanks very much, Lindsay.
I've got a few more follow-ups then on EFS 3. Councillor Beadle then next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mine was relating to EF6 because Councillor Thomas picked up on one of the points I was making.
I understand. Sorry, can we, sorry. I appreciate. I just don't want to jump around. So if it's just on EFS 6, Tom, are you all right to wait until we get there to EFS 6? Is that okay?
I am indeed, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Councillor Pam Davis, was yours on EFS 3 or?
Thank you, Chair. It was running on really from what Ross has said, that I've brought this subject of escorts up before with Lindsay, so he's well aware. I'm very concerned with not having escorts on school transport. Some of these children are not suitable to go on taxis anyway. A lot of them have not got first aid certificates. Apparently the firm that run the coaches or the taxis are responsible for that and to check that they are able to look after the obviously each child who's assessed. We hope they're assessed, but there have been problems with epileptics going into a fit, etc. Now a driver, especially at school time, we all know the increased amount of traffic on the road at school times for that half an hour after school. They have enough to do with keeping their mind on their driving and on the roads without having to look behind them and make sure that these children are okay and are safe. And even with locks on the doors now, children are very, very cute these days and they know exactly how to work the window locks and the door locks, etc. So I'm very concerned about the lack of escorts. I think Lindsay said we didn't have a statutory obligation when I asked, and even so, we do have an obligation to keep these children safe whilst they're going into school and returning home. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that and then Lindsay on EFS?
Yes, please, Chair. First of all, I just need to say a big thank you to Councillor Davis. She's provided really expert contribution to this debate over the last year or so. And Councillor Davis, it genuinely has been appreciated by myself and the team, so thank you. Councillor Davis is right, there is no statutory requirement around this. But ultimately, going back to the point that Councillor Walters raised earlier, obviously health and safety is a key area of concern, hence the reason that we've identified that there would be delivery risk if this went ahead. So again, it's something that we must maintain focus on, but ultimately it has to be health and safety first. We will continue to look at this, obviously, as I've indicated earlier, but going back to the point that Councillor Davis has said, there's two things for me. One, the safety of the learners is paramount. And secondly, what we will need to do, we need to make sure that we are fully following Welsh Government policy and guidance on this going forward. And obviously you would want assurance as elected members that officers are doing that on your behalf.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Right, we'll press on then with... Oh, sorry, Jill wanted to come in first.
Thank you, Chair. It was just, you probably expect me to say this at this point, and you know, I appreciate that everybody is asking questions about education at the moment in schools. The budget is wider than education, as we know. The MTFS, it covers the whole council, and undoubtedly, as I said in my opening address, it's a difficult task to balance an MTFS over 4 years, particularly where we've taken out significant money already. So all the things that you see in front of you in terms of the savings proposals are going to be at some degree unpopular and difficult to achieve. Some of Lindsay's, as he said, are green and they've already been achieved. So we have to balance this against finding nearly £2 million worth of savings. So if we get to the end of education and corporate scrutiny are minded to say that some of these should be removed, then I need to ask you to come to the next session with where you're going to put them back. So are you going to transfer some of these unpopular savings into social services and wellbeing tomorrow or into communities? Because we have to balance this budget. So it has to be a little bit about what are the alternatives to what is being suggested, and also if some of the pressures aren't deemed to be acceptable, then remove those to balance it as well. Do you see where I'm coming from? At the end of the day, after these 4 sessions, if everybody's found them all to be unpopular, then I can't balance the budget. So I have to have some proposals coming back. They will all be unpopular. Every saving proposal will be unpopular, and everybody will support the pressures. So we have to have an eye to the fact that this is corporate. So I'm not saying that everything that's been said isn't right, but if we take them all out, then Deb and I need something put back in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I got 2 further questions on this, and then 3 further questions on this, but I won't take any more than after that, so that we can press on with our agenda. So first of all, then John, please.
Thank you, Chair. I fully accept and understand what Jill is saying, but I've got to totally disagree with the wording you use, unpopular. When we're looking at EFS2 and the driver safety, it's not unpopular, it's unsafe. So we're not talking about unpopular decisions on that when we're talking about unsafe and risky decisions.
Okay, Councillor Voicey.
Yeah, just following up what Jill said, I fully understand that if we take out some of these savings now, we have to make balance the budget elsewhere. Is it possible where we've actually earmarked potential indicative savings for 22-23, they could be brought forward as alternatives to some of the decisions for 21-22, and would that in effect balance the budget, please?
Jill?
Chair, do you want me to comment? Yeah, yes, that is possible, providing the lead-in time is possible. So we're obviously in January. These need to start from the 1st of April. So it does depend. Some savings need consultation or some procurement, whatever. So if they're deliverable from the 1st of April, yes, they can be brought forward. Or even if you can get most of the saving, then obviously that's a possibility. Councillor Voicey.
Okay, and Councillor Gebby finally.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question, really, I suppose. We're talking about vulnerable pupils and removing their school, home-to-school transport, and removing the assistance that is provided for them. My understanding is that for any child that needs additional support, they have, part of that is about getting themselves around. Now, that may be that they have a car provided for them, or that they have a staff member that is there to support that child, and they are responsible for getting that child roundabout. So I don't understand why, as a council, we're providing a service that essentially somebody in the community is already having the money to provide for themselves. And I know that's unpopular, Jill, but you're asking for it, and I am well aware that quite often we're providing a service that families already receiving funds for from elsewhere.
Chair, if you don't mind, I'll come in on that one with Councillor Gebby. Councillor Gebby is correct. These are 2 separate issues. Obviously, my understanding is there is support given to families where there are mobility issues. With regards to learners in particular, a learner would only be in receipt of a local authority provided a place with regard to or support for home to school travel if it was clearly identified within that learner's special educational needs statement or shortly their individual development plan. If it's not stipulated in there, there is no such requirement for the local authority to provide that.
Okay, and just very quickly, while we've got you then, Lindsay, and I promise I will move on with the agenda. Can you see Councillor Walters' question in the chat, but I'll read it out for those that are not here. How much will we save if safe routes are increased, and will that reduce the budget pressure and be cheaper?
Thanks, Chair. Inevitably, I would imagine, yes, Councillor Walters. I think he was reported to Cabinet back in October. So what I'll do is I'll dig that out of the papers then. I don't have them to hand, but again, I'll find that information for you and circulate it, if that's okay.
Brilliant, thanks, Lindsay. Right.
Sorry, Chair. Chair. I'm really. I know this is really rude to dig in, but if that is a potential saving, and if that is going to reduce the pressure and also take away the concerns about safety, then that's something that we need to have definitely for tomorrow if we're going to help balance a budget and come up with a budget that is going to work. You know, we need that information really by tomorrow, or Jill needs that information by tomorrow for the next meeting, because if we are going to balance it, what else are we meant to do?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Walters. Obviously, more than happy to provide any information that's previously been provided to Cabinet. The one thing that, as I mentioned earlier, we are waiting for the outcome of a far wider ranging review of home to school transport by Welsh Government, which we understand to be completed by March. Now, obviously, timescales, I do understand the obvious issue there. But again, I'm keen to see what comes out of this independent review, because we anticipate that that's going to be helpful in this debate as well.
Yeah, okay. EFS 4 then is Councillor John Paul Blundell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Bear with me as my computer seems to be working really slow again today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lindsay and Jill and Charles. With the new structure being proposed, how concerned are you about children slipping through the net and don't get the education they deserve? And how are we going to mitigate any disruption in these children's education? Obviously, talking about the gypsy and traveller learners.
Thanks, Councillor Riddell. So with your permission, Chair, just to respond to that one. I think it's key, and I think we've indicated in the narrative there, is our number one concern is obviously mitigating any impact on what any vulnerable group would receive a service from. So if I can just give you some history to this on how we've moved and how the service we provide now is different, and obviously from the feedback we've had from Estin recently, from I think I shared it with you last night, you'll see that they are pleased with what we're doing here. We've moved from the looked after children education team and other supporting teams who support with vulnerable learners into, about 2 years ago, we moved it to the vulnerable groups team. Now that team has evolved, it's attracted additional resources to obviously support a variety of groups of vulnerable learners, and that's now called the Education Engagement Team. So this features the old LACE teams, so looked after children in education. It features a number of teams that are supporting vulnerable groups. So for example, in this instance, the Gypsy and Traveller children. And also we are looking at a variety of other mechanisms, how we integrate the support of the Education and Welfare Service. So again, this team now is a far wider ranging team that provides, in our view, and certainly Estin's view, a much better service for a much wider range of vulnerable learners. Now, again, one of the things that this team has been very effective in doing, and hence the reason it's now called the Education Engagement Team, is working far closer with schools on delivering this service, not least for those learners in school, but also supporting their families, not just in the pandemic, but also wider through the school year. With your permission, Chair, and again, which might help in answering Councillor Vendell's question, I believe Neil Claude is still in the meeting. It might be helpful to get a head teacher perspective on how the Education Engagement Team, the vulnerable groups team, have been supporting schools on this important agenda. Again, I'm in your hands, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be very valuable. I'm sure it would be valuable to you, John Paul, given you asked the question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Neil?
Hello. Can you see me? No, just hear me. I apologize. I'm trying to click on my camera, but it's not coming on. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lindsay. Well, thanks for inviting us to the meeting today. It's a privilege to be here. It's nice for me to have the opportunity actually to express my thanks to Lindsay and his team at this time for the terrific support that we have had from the Inclusion Service, from the Education Engagement Team. They do run a very lean service, it's true, and you know, particularly perhaps in transport and admissions, sometimes it's maybe one or only two people there, but they never fail to deliver. I'm very pleased to be a head teacher in Bridgend rather than another local authority, if you like. I have family and friends who are senior leaders in other local authorities, and the level of support that we have here is actually it is quite something, and it is supported very much so by Lindsay's personal approach and the work of his hard-working team. So in terms of the teams that operate underneath him, at Llangefni Junior School, we've got base and LRC with 25 or so children. One element is the care base with ASD children, the other is based with children with moderate learning difficulties. And we have terrific support from the local authority in terms of the needs of those children. I do recognise some of the comments that have been made earlier with regards to the vulnerable learners and some of the issues that perhaps are perceived, but given the experience I've had, I would just like to say that whenever I've had issues that need to be addressed, they've been addressed both competently and professionally and quickly by Lindsay and his team. And it is very difficult for that team, I think, in the current environment with the financial pressures that they have, and to protect schools again from 1% saving this year is something that I'm very grateful for, particularly given all the other pressures that must exist council-wide. But notwithstanding that, it's again my privilege to say that I'm very pleased to be a head teacher in Bridgend and feel very much supported. So that's me.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. Did you want to come back at all, John Paul?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if Neil could, Mr. Claude, could give a bit more depth to the around the question of vulnerable learners, especially in our Gypsy and Traveller communities. That was all. I appreciate his comments and they're very well made. I just wondered if you could dive in a little deeper on Gypsy and Travellers and other such vulnerable groups.
I'm afraid I can't talk too much about Gypsy or Traveller learners because we don't actually have any at this point in time in Llangefni Junior School. However, we do have, as I said, many vulnerable learners. We anticipate we'll be producing around 25 to 28 IDPs next year. And as Lindsay mentioned, the new statutory provisions that are coming into place, which were due to come in actually in September of last year, but are now coming in September of next year. In terms of the needs of the children in our school are vulnerable learners, not Gypsy, I would hasten to add, but are very delicate, are very susceptible learners. The teams that operate underneath Lindsay through both coming into school to make evaluations, coming into school to provide advice, sounding boards, through offering their support through helping us to engage with other agencies, but also just as being part of a team, part of the Team Bridgend process, does allow us to have that professional dialogue which supports us, not just for our vulnerable learners, but for all our learners. But specifically in this case, and with regard to your question, Councillor John Blundell, it's definitely the case that Lindsay's efforts are very much appreciated by all of us here at Llangefni.
Can I thank you for that response? Can I bring Hannah Castle in, please? Because I think that she might be, have more direct experience and hopefully be able to answer your question, John Paul.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Councillor Blundell. Just to give you a little bit more information, obviously the engagement team has been restructured over the last couple of months. Consequently, I think that's benefited schools. And I know that I would echo so much of what's been said today, and similarly to Neil, thank you all of you for the invite for us to be able to contribute. But I would echo in the sense of the leanness, and there is a leanness in the system. But what I would say is that in the restructuring, for example, at our comprehensive school, we have a link in with the engagement team, and we're building relationships. And those members of staff are beginning to know our staff that have key roles in terms of vulnerable pupils, but they're also getting to know those vulnerable pupils as well, because they're working with them in a variety of different fields. So whether it might be because they are working with them because of safeguarding issues, whether it's because of a vulnerability because of a domestic situation, because the information is being centralised and is then I find it's far more effective in that there's a better understanding of the vulnerability of young people, and that we are signposted. So maybe the leanness means that we don't have people coming in to school as much, but the signposting to the services that we can use, the knowledge that we have got people that we can request information from, that can support us, that we can say, help, we've got this scenario, we've got this situation, this vulnerability of a young person has emerged, and we want to try and support them as best as possible. I think that the restructuring has definitely aided us in that process. So the vulnerabilities, for example, at the moment during the pandemic are considerable, aren't they? And we've got vulnerable children in school here at Comfig today. What we've done in order to identify those children with that engagement team as well. So I'd like to say that we're putting our referrals through, and they are guiding us and looking at those referrals and speaking to us about those young children. So I think knowledge within the system has grown. I feel, as a head teacher, I feel better about that. That would be my contribution.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You don't want to come back? Do you, John Paul? No. Brilliant. Okay, EFS 5 then. I got Canon Evans then, please, to come in on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is based on the fact that there's again a reduction to Central South Consortia of 1%. Is it not time, perhaps, that Bridgen gave thought to coming out to the Central South Consortia and using that money to provide our own in-house subject advisors? I know that in Errol, Neath Talbot has pulled out. I know that Carmarthen is thinking about it, and that Pembroke is thinking about it. And I understand that in Gwere, in the north, there are also authorities that are seriously thinking of coming out. With the advent of the Donaldson curriculum for Wales, we're going to need subject advisors desperately. Wearing another hat, I'm working with Kevin Palmer, Welsh Government, to talk about professional learning facilities. So I just wonder whether we would be better served as a education authority if we had our own subject advisors, individual subject advisors, rather than pouring money into Central South, which doesn't have subject advisors. It just has general challenge advisors.
Thank you. Can I ask Lindsay to answer it first, and then I'll come to the Cabinet member for a response as well.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Canon Evans. So a couple of points there. And first of all, with regard to Central South, my view is very clear on this one. I think the value for money we get from the region is good. I think the service they provide is effective. And certainly in the main, that's reflected by the feedback I receive from head teacher colleagues. A couple of other points. First of all, with regard to removal of Bridgen from that process, regardless of the positive feedback that I will certainly give you, and certainly Estin have recommended the good working relationship we have as a local authority with the consortium, we are committed to the local authority for at least the next 2 academic years. That's something that we have agreed to with regard to our contract. So that's something that we are committed to at least until September 2023. With regard to drawing comparisons between Eru and Central South, I can speak with some confidence here, because as Canon Evans knows, I was the Chief Education Officer in Swansea, so I've seen the service provided by 2. Now, I'm not going to comment on the efficacy of the 2 models, but what I will say, they are very different models. So with regard to the one in the southeast and mid of Wales, Eru, that was an alliance model with regard to the staff were actually hosted within the local authorities, and they performed an alliance function where the local authorities came together and shared common goals and policies. The position we're in with Central South is a very different one. We operate as an intelligent client function, so effectively we commission them to undertake school improvement work on our behalf, and in the main that has been very successful and commended by schools in Estin. As far as the subject advisors is concerned, this is an interesting point. Canon Evans is absolutely right. As far as the consortium is concerned, in old money they were called challenge advisors. They're now called improvement partners, which I think is a far better term. They work with the local authority and schools to help schools and to support schools in challenging positions. They do have some subject advisors there, notably around the sciences, maths, literacy and IT. So there is some function there, but Karen Evans is right, it's certainly limited, and it would certainly not provide an in-house subject advisor team if we were to move to that model. So I think obviously I can see Councillor Smith wants to come in, and Councillor Smith will be expert in this as obviously chair of the joint committee within Central South. But my feedback from a director point of view is I'm pleased with the service they provide. I think it offers value for money, and certainly it's been their support is generally positive from schools.
Councillor Charles Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with everything Lindsay has just said. I agree partly with what Canon Evans has said in that the loss of subject advisors has been a loss, and the loss of teachers' centres has been a loss as well. That's been a long-term trend in education and educational management, which is regrettable. I don't agree that we are pouring money into Central South. I think Central South is very careful about the amount of money it requests, and the money that goes in is closely related to school populations in the different education authorities. So Cardiff is the biggest contributor, obviously, and I do agree that we get excellent value for money. Just to give you one example, there have been concerns about the online element of blended learning recently, and so as if you like, a client, not as chair of the CSE, but as a client member of the CSE, I requested a meeting with CSE to see what training facilities and what expertise is there to back up blended learning as a pedagogy. And I have to say that the service we got from that was all that I would have expected and more. And I have suggested that if Democratic Service is interested in putting that presentation before all members as some sort of training session or a pre-council meeting, then I think that would be very reassuring for many elected members who might have some doubts and worries about blended learning. It's not for a cabinet member to decide what the training process is. It's up to Democratic Services and the DS committee, I suppose. But I would recommend that you do ask Central South. I'm in my second year as chair of the joint committee, and there is a pattern that the chair stays for 2 years and then moves on. That happened when Hugh, our leader, was chair, and when Chris Elmore was chair before him. So sometime during 2021, I'm expecting my vice chair, who currently is the cabinet member in RCT, to take over the chairmanship. But the staff at CSE know that one of the bees in my bonnet is the need for more subject-related advice from improvement partners in the context of subjects. It is a matter close to my heart. As a matter of fact, a long time ago, so long ago I can hardly remember it, I was seconded to the school advisory service, which was based in Porth, and it was the best 12 months of my life, and didn't really want to go back to the classroom after it, and I don't think I did really. I went on to higher education then, which was a different thing altogether. But I do remember the days when I could call on Mr. David Maddox, the history and economics advisor, for advice. When we could find a budget and set up a course and do stuff for teachers. And they were very good days, and you didn't have to hire a hall. There was a teacher centre. Bridgen's was in Park Street, and there was a permanent warden in the teacher centre. All those things cost money, and the electorate of this country decided that it didn't want to spend money in that way, and we went into austerity. So that's one of the byproducts of austerity. But as I say, the CSE know that this is a bee in my bonnet, and I have initiated initiatives with the CSE to build up our teacher forums. Now these exist top-down in maths and those core subjects, but they exist bottom-up for other subjects. So, for example, When I first became Cabinet Member, I had an email from a DCT, Design, Craft and Technology teacher in the Vale, in Llantwit Major, I think it was, saying, can I set up a forum for DCT teachers to get together and to discuss teaching methods and pedagogy. And I said, well, the best way of doing that is through the CSC. And that has been set up and it continues. And there are several of those, and I'd like to see those expanded. And I think now that we are in COVID and the CSE can't carry out its traditional functions of taking exam results and using those as performance indicators to decide on school support. One of the few positives out of COVID, I think, is that the CSE is looking to broaden its perspective and look at this sort of initiative. So I think there is good news for Canon Evans, and I think it lies in the hands of professionals at the chalk face themselves. They've got an open invitation to form themselves into teacher forums to look at subject-based pedagogical matters, the sort of thing that the school's advisory service used to do. And the good news is, even though there aren't teacher centres anymore, you don't have to hire a hall because we're all getting used to doing this sort of stuff online these days. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask Canon Evans, do you want to come back on anything you said?
Yes, just to say thank you to Councillor Smith. If this professional learning subject advisory can be done through Central South, then that's absolutely fine. It was because it's not being provided by Central South was my suggestion that we come out, but if it can be provided, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much indeed for that assurance.
Thank you. I've got one or two requests on this item. So first of all, John Paul Blundell, I know, wants to come in on this.
Yes, Chair, thank you. It may have been covered in Councillor Smith's answer. I had to go answer the door because a parcel came, you know, as they always do when you're busy. But year on year, we've seen when we looked at this budget that we've had a cut to the consortium. And my question really is it sustainable going forward to continue to have these cuts to the consortium? Because if you know, it's just like the council, we continually keep cutting our budget and we can't do the same things we did 5-10 years ago. So is that the same with consortia? But also, but also, is the current cut that we're proposing also very similar to the cuts that the other four authorities in the consortium are making as well? Thank you.
Yes, I can answer that very quickly. I've just heard the gate rattling, so I think I've got a parcel coming, so I will be quick. But yeah, those cuts obviously are not welcome, but I think Lindsay will confirm that CSE finds that the cuts are doable. They can carry out most of their functions with those cuts.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. The Chair, through you, yes, that is the case. Two questions there. It is challenging, no doubt, but we've had lots of operational discussions with Central South to maintain the process and the facility to support schools, so they're still doing that. And the second question is it aligned with other local authorities? Yes. It's a common process across the 5 local authorities.
Okay, thanks both. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Hi, I just wanted to come in on this quickly as well, if possible. Thanks. When I first started in my role, I didn't know much about Central South, but I have to say, over the past few years, I've really come to realise how valuable they can be for schools if utilised properly. We've used them in Coity, where there have been a number of issues, and their advice and their help has been excellent. So I would really be concerned if it was taken away. What they've also been doing is been providing a lot of governor training, which I think if people aren't aware and are governors, they need to be doing their training because it's been exceptional of late and you can access it all online. So I would be concerned with removing Central South because particularly for those schools who are red and ambers, they need the support and they are very supportive if used properly. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm going to move forward then because I'm conscious of time. EFS 6 then, Councillor Beadle, I know you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, this is an area of concern to me because the amount of savings or reductions that are listed there, especially when you advocate the fact that the learning support team and the governor support team is literally the same team. So I want to know the knock-on effect there as regards to governor support, but there's a bigger issue at stake here as regards to governing bodies, because with the school's admissions team, if it's going down to the individual schools for the admissions, then also we got an issue with the governing body having to carry out this admission policy. We've been involved in the admission policy because it's under the statute for that, but also about the support that is needed for appeals, because we know that the appeals are going to be imminent when this happens. So there's a big question, bearing in mind that all school governors are volunteers, and it's quite a big workload on governors. So that they are the two main questions that I wanted to answer, but also I just needed to advise the panel that any cut in school budgets, I mean, whatever it says a savings of, say, 1%, by the time that filters down to the schools, with inflation added, that it's as much as 3%, and school governors struggle with school budgets. And I know that, and the director will bear this out, the amount of schools that have had to generate negative budgets, and it's the further support for these schools going forward. So it is a big issue. I mean, this one for me, the amount of savings, and they really flagged up the fact that governors need more support rather than less. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Lindsay, did you want to come in and respond to any of that? Or?
Thanks, Chair. First of all, can I just thank Councillor Beadle for the phenomenal work he does around the Bridgend Governors Association, because I know that he works very, very hard to make sure he works closely with the local authority to provide support for governors in schools. So Councillor Beadle, in this forum, thank you, because it is certainly valued by the local authority. I think what Councillor Beadle is saying there is absolutely correct with regard to the size of the team. They are two very, very small teams that comprise the learner support team. And when I talk small, I talk 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people. So they are very, very small. Where we are lucky, and a lot of you will know the colleagues who work in these teams, they are expert and they certainly support schools to the hilt. And I'm sure head teacher colleagues present will justify that comment. But it is a challenge. And clearly, as we've indicated in the report, if we were going to further cut this team or indeed not replace members of staff that leave, that will be a challenge and it will impact on service delivery. There's no doubt on that. Part of it is not just around obviously school admissions, which we are the local authority, from a local authority point of view, we deal with school admissions. But as Councillor Beadle says, it is an administrative workload for individual schools and administrative departments within schools alongside that team. So I certainly appreciate that. And indeed, working with schools and with people in Jill's team, managing and supporting schools with deficit budgets, again, that's a challenge and requires additional workforce centrally to support schools through quite challenging times. So I think that there's a number of issues there, but I certainly agree with Councillor Beadle, and you can see, albeit it's quite a small saving we've indicated, it will be challenging, as indicated by Red, to achieve. Two other points, Chair, just if you indulge me. First of all, just to thank Councillor Amanda Williams for the comments she's made around the support she's had from Central South. That's certainly what we've had back from the vast majority of schools, and it's been very positive. And in addition to that, I would certainly echo Councillor Williams's view with regard to governors taking up training opportunities that are offered by Central South. They are very, very good, and I know Councillor Beadle pushes this hard with the BGA. Finally, not on this point, but I noticed the comment that Councillor Shaw has made in the chat box. Councillor Shaw, you're absolutely right. The term should be Gypsy, Roma and Traveller, and we'll make sure that we amend the narrative to reflect that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lindsay. EFS 7 then. I know there were a couple of requests to speak on this. Councillor Gebby was the first one, but I don't think she's here anymore. No. So I know Lindsay Morris wanted to ask on this one.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Right, this is just highly concerning for me. The fact that it's even being considered. I understand it's not this year; it would be in next year's cuts. But I mean, currently I know from my own experience working that education psychologists, they're currently running months behind schedule, obviously because they've been unable to get into schools or do home visits at the minute. Reducing these services, it's only going to result in these delays increasing, which will mean that it's going to have even more of a direct impact on what effectively are our most vulnerable learners. Particularly given as well that these pupils now have already had a year of disruption. It's going to impact on the next few years in their education. Obviously, the COVID situation that we're all in at the minute, it's going to lead to more issues that are going to need to be addressed by school over the next few years. Now just seems to be completely the wrong time to be considering reducing any support to schooling pupils. And I would just question, I'd like to know the reasoning behind this even being considered at the minute, particularly as Lindsay said earlier, that we didn't want to have any impact on frontline earners, which reducing this clearly would.
Okay, Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lindsay. And again, all the points you've made there are well made. I agree with a lot of the things you've said. It goes back to a point I think we've discussed several times this morning. All of these proposals we put forward are all challenging. None of these are easy. With regard to this, albeit not in position for the next financial year, but the following financial year, it goes back to something I mentioned earlier to a response to a previous question with regard to two elements we're looking at. First of all, how we can benefit from economies of scale operating across the region. So that's clearly something with Liz Jones, the ALN transformation lead. Now, clearly she's working with other local authorities on doing that. And it helps both ways, because obviously what we want to do, we want to draw upon the expertise of inclusion staff that are not just in Bridgend, but in the other 4 local authorities, and vice versa. So it helps the business resilience both ways. We've indicated in the MTFS this is red. Obviously, there are challenges in proposing this, and the narrative certainly backs that up. But ultimately, I think we will be steered by what eventually comes out of the ALN bill, because there will be statutory requirements in there for the local authority. So that will shape our thinking going forward. And ultimately, we would need to go through, as Councillor Gebby quite rightly said earlier, an equality impact assessment before this decision it actually becomes in fact. So thanks, Lindsay. I think their point's well made. And clearly, from the colour of the MTFS have indicated, this is a particularly challenging area.
Did you want to come back, Lindsay?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Right, I got 2-3 others on EFS 7. Next is Councillor Spanswick.
Sorry, Chair, no, yeah, SCH1 I was looking at.
Oh, sorry. Right, oh, got you for this and SCH1. Okay,
oh, sorry, no.
I'll bring you in later, no problem. And I got Councillor Amanda Williams wanted to come in on EFS 7. Nope. Okay.
Sorry, no, I think that was earlier on the previous Appendix A.
Got you. I had you jump from the pre-meeting, but it's no problem. EFS 8 then is the staffing restructure savings. Now, I actually had a question on this one for you, Lindsay. Just basically, I was hoping to get a little bit more information on what the train of thought was here. There wasn't a lot of sort of information on there, and obviously a number of the directorates have gone through staff and restructure savings over the last number of years, and I'm curious as to where the direction of travel on this one is going.
Thanks, Chair. With regard to this one, what we're looking to do is when staff leave the service, we wouldn't seek to replace. So again, I can't go into details there because it would be disclosive, but ultimately what we'd be keen to do is not replace wherever possible, notwithstanding the fact that we don't want to increase additional duties with other staff, but clearly it's important that we look at alternative management structures if that opportunity presents itself.
Okay, I think Councillor Lynn Walters also wanted to come in on this one. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. Could I ask that if there is the potential for not recruiting when we have natural staff, staff leaving for a variety of reasons, is there any way that we can have a long-term strategic vision and use their expertise now to shape the future, as opposed to wondering how we're going to deal with it once they've left, because using their expertise may actually result in additional savings being identified over the coming years, which will help everything, help efficiency, and long-term sustainability of employment.
Thanks, Councillor Waters. Absolutely an excellent suggestion, and indeed that's something I've been charged by the Chief Executive to do. I've been asked to look at the longer term vision. Obviously, we are focused very much on the here and now and the next months or so ahead, but absolutely, we are using those staff to shape the vision ahead, as we've done with previous restructures as well. So it's a very good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then SCH1 then is John.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could just comment on EFS8 about the concern about staff leaving and the work being just passed to other staff or other ways. It was raised by Councillor Gebby earlier. We can't just keep losing staff and expecting less people to do the same. And even for the other ways of doing things, sometimes with other ways, end up re-employing people that's been finished to come back as consultants. There needs to be a clear plan about how that's going to work. But SCH1 is a comment basically. It's the proposed 1% cut or 3% over 3 years. It was touched on earlier by Councillor Shaw that you're supposed to be all in this together, and the longer we put off the education, I'm not saying that the schools have done a marvellous job and do a brilliant job, but we all have to take a share of the pain, and at the moment there's a disproportionate share of pain in cuts to all other services the longer we put off the cut to schools. Even if it was a 0.5% cut this year and 0.5% last year, because schools were warmed up to this by the director last year and probably the year before. So they've been warmed up to the fact cuts are coming and we all need to take our share of the pain in cuts because it's disproportionate, especially when the communities directed, which are affecting some of our services out there, frontline services and the visible services. So I was disappointed to see that there's not some sort of saving and some sharing of the pain within schools this year. So it's a comment rather than a question.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm interested though in the response, if you don't mind. I know it's a political question, so can I ask one of the cabinet members maybe just to speak to John's point? I know there are a few cabinet members on here at the moment.
Hi, Chair. It's Councillor Richard Young. This isn't my area, I think it's fair to say, except that I accept John's point. I don't think any one of us as councillors ever came onto the council to force people into situations where they have to work harder for less and do more with less to be able to work with. But unfortunately, that is the hard reality of where we live today. We have come through 10 years, 11 years of quite stringent austerity. I'm old enough, as you can probably see on the screen, that I was on Mickle Morgan County Council in the good old days of the 90s, when although we had complaints with central government that we didn't have enough money, we didn't actually expect to see what was coming, but we did have a lot of money and we did manage to keep all services running, and we even had money that was available to us to instigate programs and to instigate services that have sadly in the past years been taken away from us. But it's a hard reality. I have sympathy with what Councillor Spanswick says. But we have to live in the world as it is at the moment. We have a budget. Money is not finite. It's not infinite. It is finite, and we have to cut our cloth according to our means. And I think you heard Jill earlier on saying that if we take a cut out from one area, then we have to put it in from another area. There are no easy choices. It is a balance. Now, if you think that we've got it wrong, then you've got to come back to us and say, well, this is not a cut where you're going to make the cut.
Thanks, Richard. I know the leader, Councillor David, wants to come in as well.
Thanks, Chair. And just to make the point that in terms of future years, then it is an indicative budget and strategy that we have, and I don't think anyone can make accurate forecasts and predictions about the future finances because there is so much uncertainty at the moment. But obviously, we do need to prepare budgets that reflect a scenario where we have to make significant savings, but we hope that that austerity has ended and will not restart. But we have to plan for the worst. So if our finances are better, then we will make fewer cuts and try and as well limit council tax increases with that improved support from central government, and we welcome the better settlement, much better settlement that we've had this year than we anticipated, and that has enabled us to actually abandon some proposals that were in the initial medium-term financial strategy that would have been even more unpopular and would have had more of an impact on members of our communities. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Hugh. Follow up then from Councillor Shaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's been a lot of interesting debate this morning about some cuts that, if you add them up, add up to less than £500,000. And while I'm cognizant of Councillor Beadle's comments and the support he's given to schools, if that 1% efficiency saving was implemented, that's £1 million a year. So the cuts to psychology services and learner support, etc., only amount to less than £100,000. It seems foolhardy to take out £100,000 and lose those very valuable services to all schools for the sake of not implementing an efficiency saving, as we haven't done for the last 3 years. That was my point. Not balancing everybody else's budget within the education budget alone. It is indicated a place where you could actually offset all those cuts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod. Okay, so that concludes Appendix A and B. I've got a couple of questions that don't kind of neatly fit into the appendices that I've had requests for prior to the meeting. So I'll kind of go through those in order I received them at the beginning. So I know Councillor Voice has a question on the timing of the identification of savings and the implementation of them. Councillor Voice.
Thanks, Chair. I really think I asked this when Jill answered the question about, if we can identify forward savings, because clearly we always say we're going to make savings in the current financial year, and quite often we don't achieve those savings. Why aren't we bringing forward, savings for the next couple of financial years and bringing them on stream quicker if we have to? And, that may be one way of balancing the budget, but we ask the question every year, if we can identify it in 2 years' time, why aren't we doing it now?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, thanks, Matthew. I know we've had a response from Jill on that earlier. I know the leader is here. I just wondered if he wanted to make a comment on Councillor Voice's thoughts.
Thanks, Chair. It will depend on the type of saving that's been made, because if it is a cut, then obviously we do include some cuts in the medium-term financial strategy that we include because there are few other savings left to make, and we heard the Director of Education and Family Support about that this morning, and we would only make those cuts if the financial position means that we've got no choice. So if we have a better financial position than we originally anticipated, then it's sensible for us not to make those reductions. There are some savings that we do want to make, and we are trying to bring those forward. So the Fit for the Future budget consultation was focused on different ways of providing services. So we've all seen that shift from face-to-face service delivery to online service delivery. That can make significant savings for us, and we are looking to bring that forward. We have and we are bringing forward, for example, savings on office accommodation costs, which we'd all support, because that is not an impact on frontline service delivery. And we'll do further work about the which was reported yesterday. There's there's public support for us changing the way that we deliver some of those services, and I think there'd be support from members for that as well.
Thanks,
Chair.
Thanks, Leader. I think the Chief Executive even wants to come in. I nearly called you Councillor Shepherd. Apologies.
I'm not sure if that's a promotion or not, Councillor Gifford, but thank you. I just wanted to build on what the leader said, and first of all, Councillor Voisey, thanks for the question, because I think as a principle, it's a very sensible one, but also just to give members some reassurance, really, that in the main, when savings are identified for future years, it is usually because there's been some analysis and recognition that either the process involved, as Jill described earlier, perhaps to do with consultation or statutory processes, or indeed the capacity of the service doesn't allow that saving to be brought forward, or sometimes because there is a contract end or a lease end or something at a future date where we know we can make a saving at that point, but not before. So I absolutely agree with the principle, and we can certainly look at that again. But I did want to reassure you that that's obviously one of the first places we go when we're seeking to bring, when seeking to make savings for this coming year, is whether something can be brought forward. And often, having done the detailed analysis, there are good reasons why that can't be. So I just think that's an important point to make. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Next question is from Councillor Alex Williams, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'd actually like to commend the protection of the schools budget this year, and I actually hope that there's an uplift in the local government settlement to be able to do this in future years. Many schools are running significant deficit budgets at the moment, and this would, I think, put schools under even more pressure, which would be unsustainable. Now, I have a number of overall questions about the MTFS and budget pressures. Jill, Deb and the team put a lot of work into the MTFS, and Jill, Mark, Hugh, Richard have made some very important points about having to see this in the round rather than looking at directorates in isolation. So the report refers to policy changes which include reducing services to the statutory minimum, as well as cutting some discretionary services. So I'd like to ask, which statutory services has the Cabinet already looked at reducing to a minimum, and which discretionary services have the Cabinet considered cutting to meet these budgetary pressures? The report also says that there will be new pressures surrounding COVID, but that the Welsh Government would continue to provide funding for this. However, if there's a shortfall in central funding, will the local authority have to absorb this? And what estimate has been given on the impact of that? And then finally, the report refers to the impact of additional Welsh Government legislative changes on the local authority, and the report refers to acts like the Environment Act, the commitment to eradicate homelessness, the implications of the local government bill, etc. So I'd like to ask Jill whether she expects this to be fully funded by the Welsh Government, and if not, I think a recommendation needs to be that this committee and the council push back on the Welsh Government to ensure that any additional legislation which comes our way doesn't put on this local authority additional financial pressure without the consequential funding.
Thanks, Alex. Jill, do you want to respond to that?
Okay. We could be here for a long time for me talking about statutory and discretionary services. As Councillor Williams will know, I'm fairly passionate about not making the clear distinction sometimes, because often the discretionary services are those that actually help to reduce the demand on the mandatory services. So I think if others may want to come in, but I think it's fair to say that every single service has been looked at, and that's the proposals that you see in front of you. And Lindsay's gone through some of the proposals in there, some of which are a reduction in statutory services. Now, it's always very difficult to assess where the minimum level for a statutory service is. As you've heard me say before, a library service could be just a book, or it could be something completely different, which involves discretionary services within a library. So it's really quite difficult. But I suppose the only thing I can reassure Councillor Williams is that every single service has been scrutinised thoroughly by the directors, and the proposals that you see in front of you have been put forward. So it's much more nuanced than just this is the minimum level. It's a little clearer when you come to social services and wellbeing about the sort of levels, but even then there are different ways of delivering services, and Mark's alluded to we've got incredibly different ways. Who would have thought that a lot of our services would have been delivered without being face-to-face, even in social services and wellbeing? So we can come back to that one, certainly, Councillor Williams, if others want to come in. In terms of COVID, I've been consulting my crystal ball while I've been talking in terms of what we're likely to have in the future. And I think you've heard me say a number of times, the one thing that is consistent about the situation at the moment is the complete uncertainty. We have been fortunate that the Welsh Government set up a hardship fund, and we've been successful at getting money from that. We've probably only had about 75 to 80%, but even so, that is significant. And when you look at the Q3 report, I said this to Cabinet yesterday, there's over 3 million, probably about 3.4 million that we've secured from the hardship fund that otherwise would have been a pressure on our budgets. So we could have been in a much worse situation at this point in time. We've been successful at getting our loss of income claims. We've had money for CTRS, and there is a possibility that there'll be some help on council tax, but that's yet to be determined. But I think it's fair to say that the homelessness that you mentioned has been supported up until now. I don't know what's going to happen next year. The Welsh Government officials aren't abundantly clear what's going to happen. Next year is a whole new round of money and resources, and that is my nervousness, as you've heard me say in the presentation, that we could be facing a cliff edge at some point as we recover services. So even though we've got a better settlement, the leader was quite right to say, you know, we still need to be very careful. We can't just sort of abandon our principles, our governance, our financial governance, just because we've been successful this year. So additional legislation, Councillor Williams, is one that's come up time and time again. The Chief Executive and also the leader and the Cabinet always make strong representations about money coming with changes of legislation. It's not always successful, and also we sometimes don't know how much some of these things are going to cost. The ALN bill in particular has had much wider ramifications, I think, than anybody thought, and certainly the new homelessness guidance is likely to cost the council a 2 million pressure. Now, we're hopeful that there will be money associated with that. The Minister has made it very clear that it's one of her commitments, but the uncertainty is still there. So I don't know if I've kind of covered those questions. I've tried to be really brief, Chair, because I'm really conscious that if I really want to go on mandatory and discretionary, we could run into council.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Did you want to come back, Alex?
Just briefly, and that was very helpful, Jill. Thank you very much. And it's the reasoning behind my question is to be supportive of you and the council. And I think one of the recommendations coming out of this committee should be that we support our cabinet in writing to the Welsh Government to ensure that any additional legislation comes with the consequential funding. Because ultimately, if it doesn't, the political choices which the cabinet need to make about our statutory services or even the discretionary services which we would like to do within our remit will be all the more difficult. So, I would strongly ask for member support in doing that.
Okay. We've got two more questions then, just quickly on council tax. So, Councillor Spanswick.
Thank you, Chair. It's page 24, roll over to 25. It's just to check that there's probably an error in the statement, because it talks about the proposed council tax at 3.9%, but the paragraph finishes saying proposed council tax increase for 21-22 will remain at 4.5%. I'm assuming the year is wrong on the end of the paragraph.
I haven't got it in front of me, Councillor Spanswick. I'll double check that. It's just to say that 4.5 will be the estimate going forward, as per the MTFS previously, but we'll check that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Finally, I know Councillor Lynn Walters had a point on council tax as well.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it was 4.14.1, page 28, and it was around the Fit for the Future. And I know that there was something in yesterday's Cabinet report and also the email that came out, that there was a 58% reduction in responses. So my concern was really where have the responses come from? Are the majority from IT savvy or people who are, how can I put it, are, well, in a better position, who were supportive for the increase in council tax. So it's really just a case of understanding how we ensured that this year's survey was completed across all economic groups. Thank you.
Chair, do you want me to pick that up?
Yes, thanks, Jill.
Yeah, thanks. I won't go into the full report, Councillor Walters, and obviously there'll be an opportunity to hear Nick Bunston to go through the detail quite shortly, I assume. It's hard to say that it hasn't been an unprecedented year. I mean, it's sort of everybody uses that term, but what we did was tried our level best, I think, to get to everybody that we would normally have got to. So, as you know, every single group, as far as possible, is represented, and the comms team go out of their way to make the survey available, to go and talk to people. Now, obviously, as you read the report, it's very clear that some of the face-to-face stuff couldn't happen. And the number of contributors is significantly down, and they're very disappointed. The team are incredibly disappointed because we were doing really well in terms of increasing the contributions. We have run it through the machine, and it is statistically sound, but it's very, very hard to make sure that that it is completely representative of every single group in the way that we had to do it this year. So we've taken every step, and I think you'll see, and obviously Nick is also our equalities officer, and so she's very, very conscious that this shouldn't be just people who happen to have a laptop. So the way they did it is set out in the report. I think you'll be satisfied that they've made every effort, and indeed there were contributions from people who probably weren't just tech savvy. But obviously we have to, it's a statutory requirement, and we have to live, I think, with the fact that it's an odd year.
Can I come back and say what I should have preceded my comments with was I do appreciate how difficult the year was, and thank you very much for all the work that the comms team have done. And I do appreciate how difficult it's been, and thank you for giving me that level of information. So thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks. Leader, I can see that you requested to speak. Was that an old request or was it a new one?
Yeah, it was old, but just very briefly, I wanted to thank Councillor Williams for his support in terms of the point and the principle, which is a vital one, that if new responsibilities and statutory responsibilities are placed on the local authority, that they are funded in full, and that funding is a permanent increase in funding, because sometimes we get short-term temporary funding made available to us, but the responsibility is a permanent responsibility and a permanent cost and a permanent pressure. Just to add, I made this point yesterday. Certainly, there's some learning from the consultation on the budget. So we have reached out to some new groups actually, which is to be welcomed, and we'll build on that next year. But certainly we'll redouble our efforts to reach groups who are digitally excluded. And find new ways of doing that, because it's a fair question from Councillor Walters. We've got to make sure that our consultation is as inclusive as it can be, but we will retain some of those ways of consulting people, because some people found that easier this year in terms of virtual but face-to-face consultation, for example. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Hugh. Right, okay, so that concludes the kind of first part of the meeting where we've looked at education and a couple of other topics. So I know we're about to look at the Communities Directorate, but I would like, therefore, to propose, if someone would like to second, handing over the chair to Councillor John Paul Blundell in order to take the second part of the meeting.
Move, Chair.
Second.
Brilliant. Okay, Councillor Blundell, all yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Chair, yeah, it's interesting. And just like transitioning there, just like Doctor Who, very seamless. Okay, I'm just obvious of time. We've been here for 2 hours. Do members want a comfort break, or should we just crack on? You can shout out.
Crack on, Chair, I think.
On,
you know, because we've got something at 2 o'clock now as well, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, crack on. Packed day today. Right. Okie doke then. Got to take members then to comms 1 and 3 on page 39 and 40 then, as soon as I get my thing to load. I've no one coming in at the moment on com 1. Does anyone have anything on com 1 on the budget pressures?
Yes, please. I did, Chair.
Oh, that was on the proposals, Nora. I've got you down.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Anyone in? Okay, I've not got anyone. All right, give them a minute. And then again on the budget pressures for com 2, does anyone have anything on that? Just type speak in the conversation chat bar. No. Okay then. Oh, hang on. Councillor Spanswick for com 2 on budget pressures.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to find it on my screen as well. Com 1, sorry. I was on the wrong page. Com 1. I suppose if I didn't speak on it, it's the ongoing savings regards to the CAT transfer process of 300,000. It's not just the CAT transfer process, because
sorry, John. Councillor, that's for pressures. That's for I was on proposals.
We're on pressures.
Yeah, we're on pressures. That's right. I've got you down for pressures proposals, so don't worry. Did you want? I'm assuming you don't want to speak. Councillor Shaw then on com 3. On budget pressures, Councillor Shaw, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. The computer I've tiled all my questions and all the papers on has had a complete meltdown. So pass me if you don't mind at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. If you do remember your question, feel free to email it to us, and we'll get you a written response, and we'll send that out to all members.
Yeah, I still can join the meeting. That's on a different computer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But if you remember your question later on after the meeting, just write to us.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now we're on Column 1 of proposals, page 42 and 43. Column 1, first up is Councillor Spanswick.
Thank you, Chair. Back on track. Yeah, it's in amber, and we keep in, or the proposal is to keep the £300,000 cut to a service which has been cut over many, many years. I'm not against the cut process. It works well, and there was a marvellous example in yesterday's cabinet meeting with Kevin Cribbo, Athletic Club, having a grant and doing some wonderful work. That, where clubs are able to do it and want to do it and is sustainable, great, not against it. There's many smaller people, clubs, just maybe run with 1 or 2 volunteers, feel as if they've got their backs up against the wall, and it may not be appropriate for them. I feel just pushing ahead, regardless of the policy, and to try and say 300,000 is wrong, where some clubs and some community councils even maybe not want to do it, that they've been felt like they have no choice because the calculations of the costs, which are flawed as well as far as I'm concerned, don't work out, and it's not the way forward for those that don't want to do it. But it's not just the cut process. The narrative also talks about reduction of grass cut areas, which I understand, maintain parkland and number of children's play areas. So it's not clear. So if we suddenly had been told in the future a play area shut in, we'll be told it was in the budget, it was in the process. So this is more than just about the cut process. It's about our services out there, our parks and open spaces, our green spaces, which through the Public Service Board and many other places there's been surveys saying people value the green spaces. And it can't just be down to voluntary groups and town and community councils to be responsible for future generations. We have a responsibility as well. And I think this continuing with this flawed cut of 300,000, that could be left there to reinvest in our green spaces for the future generations of our agenda. So it's a comment and a ramble more than anything, and I think it shouldn't be there. There's enough cuts already taking place.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. I've got a number of speakers on this, but does anyone want to come back on Councillor Spanswick's point now? Jill, Janine, Richard?
Yes, Chair, it's Janine Nightingale. For the purposes of the recording, Janine Nightingale, Corporate Director of Communities. Councillor Spanswick, the reason that, of course, you understand that the saving is in there, it's the savings that we will see from or a potential saving reduction from transferring to the CAP process. And of course the CAP process is voluntary. We would not persuade anyone to CAP transfer if we didn't feel they could. And of course the other thing as well, and I think this is illustrated, as you said beautifully last night at Cabinet, is there's a very robust business process behind that business plan process, that we have to assure ourselves that the organisation who's taken on the responsibility has the ability to maintain the facility and that it is financially viable. And that's really important to ensure the vibrancy of that club going forward. And if we did have an application from a club that we didn't feel was sufficiently resourced and or didn't have the capacity, then we would not accept that CAP transfer. And that's something. So it's not something we would mandate clubs to do. It's something we're encouraging them to do should they have the right resource. But please be assured there's a very robust business planning process behind it to ensure the club can ensure sustainability. Now, what I'm going to do, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask Zach Shell, he's with us today, my head of operation services for communities, to come in and comment in a little bit more detail about some of the other things that you mentioned in terms of grass cutting and or the children's play, maintenance of children's play. What I will say, though, is this doesn't, what we're not going to do and not prepared to do is reduce the amount of maintenance we undertake on children's play. That's not what we're suggesting here. There were some budget reductions about reducing the number of cuts we give to areas of grassland across the borough, but we must ensure our children's play are safe and fit to use, and we have a duty of care for children for health and safety reasons for children's play. But I will let Zach add some additional detail if you don't mind on this question. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
No worries. Zach, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I'll add, Chair.
I mean, in terms of the CAP process, things are going very well at the moment. We've had quite a lot of success. Nearly all of the bowl screens within the borough are now being maintained by the relevant clubs. Councillor Spanswick touched on Kai Goff and the success there, with the very positive report that went to council yesterday. Rest Bay playing fields with Porthcawl Football Club transferred just the other week, and is now, not an ongoing maintenance liability for the authority. And there are others that are very close. I think Herman Road with Kyra Football Club in Kyra, that is very close to being probably the next CAT that we'll do. So we're in a train now, and these are happening. There was a lot of talk about this sort of a year or two back, in various scrutiny committees when CAT was first starting. Is this really going to happen? Our club's going to take them on? It is happening. We are having positive success. So I think a large amount of that saving, that will be attributable to CAT, will be deliverable. I agree, though. There are going to be some clubs that struggle, and we all know that our position at the moment is we won't go to full cost recovery for as long as the clubs are committed to the CAT process. We may have challenges down the line if some decide to pull away from the CAT process, but as things stand at the moment, literally every club in the borough has expressed an interest and is at various stages along the line to undertaking a CAT. So I think it's a really positive story on CATs. Obviously, the saving that's mentioned isn't just CATs, as Councillor Spanswick talked about. One of the things that was approved in a previous cabinet report is delegated power to Councillor Young to sign off on some other saving measures as well, and this will include reviewing our grass cut areas, making reductions there, and also having a look at children's play areas and the numbers, and as Janine pointed out, not reducing the quality of what we have, but potentially the quantity. And obviously, it's a big saving to achieve. It's £300,000. I can't argue with Councillor Spanswick because, it's my area and it has experienced savings before, and I'd love to not have to experience savings, and make some of these cuts and measures that we are, faced with. But, all the choices are difficult now. As with the original list that went forward as the MTFS savings, there were lots of other unpalatable savings as well. And I also appreciate, something has to be done. And this is the one that remains on the list, for myself and the team to action.
Thank you for that, Zach. Councillor Spanswick, you said you want to come back.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very briefly, and on 2 points. One, accept what Janine and Zach has said, but Janine comments, so this is a voluntary process. Well, yeah, it's voluntary, but all the clubs basically have got their backs against, or those that are not that keen, got their backs against the wall, because the alternative is to pay quite excessive costs which originally identified to them, and now we've told them they've been limited while they showed interest. So it's a catch-22. There are ones out there that probably are not interested, not capable of doing it, but have no option other than to show an interest. Otherwise, they'll be clobbered with excessively high fees based on calculations, again, which I think are flawed. And secondly, the cuts clearly says about, and that confirmed it then, about reducing the number of children's play areas. Well, children have been impacted by COVID. They haven't been out for a year. They rely on our parks and play areas. And here we are talking about cutting numbers of play areas. We should be investing and increasing the number of play areas. Children have a right to play. And this is a flawed cut, and it needs to be removed.
Okay, thank you for Councillor Spanswick. Councillor Young, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. No, I can't agree with Councillor Spanswick, unfortunately, on this. I mean, when we decided to expand the CAT programme, it was taken not lightly. We had to make the savings. We couldn't provide the level of sports provision to the clubs because of the cuts that we were facing as an authority. And we're not proposing here to reduce playing fields for children. This figure reflects exactly what we said at the time. I don't know if you can remember when the decision was called in, but we explained when the decision was called in that this was to make year-on-year savings going forward. The figure reflects the fact that we will no longer be required to maintain those playing fields to the standard that leagues and other organisations would need. That will now be down to the clubs. And this is a direct reflection of that policy. Now, I think it was the right policy, and I think the amount of activity that we've seen from the clubs has proved the decision, if you like, in as much as Zach said, virtually every club or organisation has indeed applied to look at the possibility of taking a transfer forward. That doesn't mean to say that it is for every club. It doesn't mean to say that every club will have the ability to do that. And if they can't do that, there is a commitment from the local authority that we will support those clubs. So I think it's not a question of us taking this out, because I think it's an important cut, saving, whatever you want to call it. This is the reason why the extension of the transfer scheme was brought in, and therefore I think it would be a silly and foolish thing to do to take it out now. And if we did take it out, I am not sure where in the Communities Directory we could actually make up the money that we are not saving on this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Spansbury, did you want to come back, or are you?
Just briefly say it's down to choices, Chair, because there's the education cut not being made, and there's so it's choices, and that's for another debate.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure this won't be the last time we ever hear about CAT, and I'm sure our committee and Scrutiny 3 will be looking at this in the future and how well it's done and assessing that. Councillor Lynn Walters, I have you next on my list for Com.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just really a question on whether Newbridge Fields is included as one of the assets identified in the 300,000, as it's a very difficult community space to include in the CAT. The complexity makes it highly unlikely that it would be able to be unwound and sorted out within a year. So it's really just a case of understanding about Newbridge Fields, please, as a specific item.
Thank you for that, Councillor Walters. Jean, Zach, either one of you want to come back?
I'm happy to respond on this one. So in terms of the 300,000, that is our best estimate of what we think we can get across the line in the coming year, coupled to other savings within the section that we believe we can make. There will also be and that isn't us assuming that we will have everything catted in this coming financial year, because that's unrealistic. So Newbridge Fields doesn't necessarily have to be catted in the coming year. However, all facilities are, the desire is to CAT transfer all of the facilities, and that does include Newbridge Fields. To that end, as you say, it's complex, and we've commissioned a separate report that's been undertaken by consultants to look at how that can fit together and how we could potentially have a joint body that oversees the entire area, and various ways that it could potentially work as a CAT transfer or be divided up to look at options. So we're looking at it. Yes, it is on the list, but yes, we also know it's difficult, and we've commissioned some separate work on it as a result.
May I come back, please, Chair? So my question really has, I'm a little bit confused then as to how much of the 300,000 is attributable to Newbridge Fields, because of the complexity. I am concerned that we are including savings for Newbridge Fields within the upcoming year, and that will then have an impact on our overall budgets. So that is the question: how much of the 300,000 is attributable to Newbridge Fields for the next financial year?
Okay, in terms of exact for individual locations, we've got a list of what our costs are at each place, so I can send that through to you separately, but I can't provide that right now.
That'd be great. Thank you, Zach. Is that everything you wanted to say, Councillor Walters, or is there anything else?
No, that That's all. I think Matthew wants to come in. Thanks.
He does. Yeah, I've got him down. Matthew, it is on this point, isn't it?
Yes, it's regarding asset transfer and the suggestion that town councils be invited to, contribute. The problem is that, and I speak, as a member of Bridgend Town Council, is that as one of the largest community councils in the borough, we seem to shoulder the burden for the ratepayers of Bridgend on a double whammy, because if the town council comes in, it's still being used, the facilities are still being used by a much broader spectrum of residents, and it really is a case that some of these services and facilities need to be held at county level, so that the burden falls on the taxpayer throughout the county, not just the town of Bridgend, which has some of the poorest wards in Wales. And it's totally unfair if it is just bounced over to community councils. I know that was a potential proposition, and I would speak very strongly against that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Voicey. Councillor Richard Young said he wants to come in. Can you come in?
Yeah, thanks. Just turning on the mic and the camera. It's not a question of bouncing it over the town councillors at all. You are right in what you're saying about Newbridge Fields. It's a complex issue. There are a number of organisations that are, in actual fact, got a vested interest in Newbridge Fields, but it's not a situation that's in isolation. We have the same sort of problem in my stake, where there is a similar sort of situation in Tring. I think what we are looking at with Newbridge Fields is we have, as you've heard with Zach, organised these consultants to come back and report to us. But I think the general feeling is that there would be some sort of management committee. Now, whether or not Bridgend Town Council wants to be involved in that management committee is for Bridgend Town Council to make their mind up on. So we're not telling them, we're not bouncing it over to them at all. It's for them to make their own decision on that. But I think there is merit in actual fact looking at a situation where we have a number of clubs interested in a site, and let's face it, Newbridge Fields is quite a large site, then it makes sense to have some form of management committee. So really, I don't accept the point that we're bouncing this over to Bridgend Town Council. It's up to them to make up their mind. We could form a management committee based on any sort of shape that all organisations that are involved in Newbridge Fields deem appropriate. So really, let's wait until the consultants have done their work, and we can take a report to them. We can look at consultation and see what they want to do with it. But at the moment, as I said, it's complex. We wait for the report. We wait to consult with those clubs that require consultation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Young. Councillor Walters, you've indicated you want to come back on this.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about this. It's I think the thing that we've got to bear in mind, and it goes back to my original question as to how much of the 300,000 is tied up in Newbridge Fields from a budget perspective, for the simple reason it's not just playing fields, it's also public right of open space. The land, I think in the very, very first meeting that we had in the council offices, I asked the question on how the land came to us and what rights the public have for that space. So it's very, very difficult, and that's why I'm saying about the complexity of handing it over to clubs. It's also our floodplain in Bridgend. So it's not just, it's the protection for the town of Bridgend as well. So that's why I am banging on about how much of the £300,000, because even with a management committee, and I actually agree that is the way to go. So I'm not saying about not transferring it. I'm not talking about it being managed in a different way, but there are other parts. It's not just playing fields. It's our protection for the infrastructure of Bridgend, being the floodplain, the new wellness village that is being developed in Sunnyside, all of that. And so The question I'm asking is how much of the £300,000 may be at risk in this budget of not being able to being a saving, transfer, cost reduction, whatever you want to call it, that may not be able to come in the coming 12 months.
Can I just come back in on that then,
Of course,
please, Chair, rather than put it in the chat box? I accept everything that Councillor has said. In all fairness, Councillor Walters is absolutely right. It is very, very complex, and we've admitted that it's complex, and a way has to be found to move forward on that. With regard to the £300,000, we accept the question. At the moment, the officers are not in a position to give a definite answer on that, but we have promised to come back and provide with the answer on that in a written form. I have to say that I'm sure this is not the last time that we are going to discuss Newbridge Fields in the form of cut, and on that basis, I'm sure your scrutiny committee, Mr. Chairman, will be scrutinising this all the way down the line. So I think there's enough built-in support in that, in actual fact. So this won't be the last time. We will get the answer that you require, Councillor Walters, and I'm sure you'd like to share that with the rest of your colleagues.
Thank you for that, Councillor Young. Yes, I do believe our committee will be looking at that down the line. I've got Councillor Keith Edwards. I do see you have indicated, but I'm going to bring in Councillor Clark and Councillor Green, and then yourself. So I haven't missed you. You are on my list. Councillor Clark.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I want to go back to the grass cutting, where it mentions, just basically for my own clarity, if nothing else, it says a reduction of grass cut areas. Are we talking about reducing the grass cutting in areas, or are we actually not doing some areas? I think that's what Zach mentioned. And I wanted to come back on something that John Spanswick mentioned regarding play areas. And are we talking about not cutting the grass in some play areas? Are we talking about closing play areas? And can I ask, as I don't really know, have we not got a statutory duty to supply play areas and equipment for children? And again, as Councillor Spanswick mentioned, especially in these days that we've got COVID, some families have only got a play area in which to take their child to play. They haven't got an open space or anything like that. So if I could answer answers to that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach, Janine, I don't want Zach.
Yeah, happy to come back. So on the grass cut areas, Councillor Clark, you may recall you asked, is it a reduction in frequency or a reduction in actual areas cut? So you may recall that in the current financial year, so this year that we're in now, there was a reduction in frequency made. So we had less cuts this year than we'd had in previous years. And you probably recall the previous years was a reduction on a number of years before that. So I think we had 2 cuts at 7, then I think we went to 5 cuts this year. So we've already had a reduction in frequency. We don't think we can go any further with the reduction in frequency, or we will just get, a very high level of complaints if we went any further with the frequency reduction. So we are now looking at a reduction in actual areas cut. So this will be a case of choosing areas that will no longer be cut, that can be signed off by Councillor Young. On the play areas, again, it won't be about reducing the quality of the ones that we do have, but it will be about reducing the quantity of them. So identifying some that potentially could not be used anymore. And with regard to is it a statutory duty? Yes, nearly everything in my area is a statutory duty. So obviously, we still do have to make sure place efficiency, is there. But it, again, if savings are to be made, it would be a mixture of all of these things.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Councillor Clark, did you want to come back on that, or are you happy with the answer?
No, I think Zach covered everything. I think, obviously careful consideration, and I'm sure that will happen. If BCBC are looking at closing play areas, then obviously that would really need to be considered. Really considered where the majority of residential areas are, etc., and what access residents have got to the most closest one to them, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair, may I come back? It's Janine.
Yes, Janine.
Thank you. Just to add a little bit to what Zach has already stated. I think where we are with this, Councillor Walters, is we won't. I can't remember who asked the question. It was Councillor Walters, wasn't it?
Clark.
Yes. Oh, Councillor Clark. Apologies. We won't be getting anywhere to the position where we'll be under the statutory requirement, because of course we have to provide that. So that's really, really important. We make sure we've got enough play for statutory reasons across the borough. But what we'll have to do is sensitively look at some of the play areas that are possibly older than others, or probably less used than others, and where there won't be a significant impact if they were removed. Because you do know we have little play areas that maybe have one swing and something else, and not used very frequently. So what we want to look at is making sure the play that we've got is suitable for a wide range of age groups, has got lots of very good equipment, are looked after, and that's really important. And the other thing as well, what we must remember, is for children, play is not just about ensuring they've got equipment. Play is about ensuring there are spaces that are maintained, kick a ball, run round, safe places for children to play. Doesn't necessarily have to include formalised equipment, albeit children do like that, but we're very mindful of that, and when we undertake this review, that's something that we really want to look
at. Thank you very much. I seem garnered a lot of comments now. Councillor Spanswick, you want a quick comment on play provision?
Very briefly.
Yeah, Councillor Gray, I'm just going to let Councillor Spanswick make a quick comment on play provision.
Sorry.
Very briefly
on town community councils.
Area open space provision. The last open space player audit identified insufficient players in open space in most wards, and definitely in Brackler, but we are insufficient in our player provision in Bridgend County Borough.
Thank you, Councillor Spanswick. I think that's something we can go forward and try and correct that. Hopefully we will. Councillor Green, I told you I'd get to you eventually. Your question on town and community councils.
Thank you very much. I brought this up, this is I think the third year now I brought it up. In terms of grass cutting and weed spraying, I have asked if town and community councils could be provided with the cost of extra grass cutting and weed spraying within their communities, should they wish to exercise their right to maintain their communities. We're already, lots of us, doing things like hanging basket provision, we do Christmas lights. This would simply be another means of ensuring that our communities and towns look aesthetically pleasing, but I've never been able to get any sort of response on a cost for this. I'm quite sure not everybody would wish to take it up, but I know for a fact the community council I'm a member of, as is the chair, has made inquiries about this and would certainly look very favourably upon providing extra the weeds that in the last year I've had so many complaints, would be happy to pay for such activities to be carried out. So I would ask yet again, please consider this and get some prices to town and community councillors if they wish to pursue it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Zach, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, happy to come back on that. I mean, many town and community councils do undertake additional grass cutting. Where I live here in Brackler, certainly additional grass cutting is undertaken by the community council, and it's not the only one. There's areas in Canelli. There's quite a lot of that taking place. and activities of this nature. Normally, those community councils or town councils would undertake that by contractual arrangements themselves, or some might even employ their own staff. These services, so our open space grass cutting and our weed spraying, it's not undertaken by directly employed BCBC staff. We just effectively engage contractors to undertake those services, which all the town and community councils, are free to do as well. They can equally engage contractors to undertake those services. What we would ask is to link with us so we can coordinate. So ideally, additional grass cuts, etc., happen in between the cuts that we contractually have undertaken. But much of that is taking place across the borough already in many areas.
Thank you for that. Councillor Green, did you want to come back?
Yes, please, just briefly. Well, I'd very much like to put that to the Community Council. To whom would our clerk correspond then in order to arrange for this to be done, should we agree as a council to do it?
In terms of your ability to do it, you have the ability as a town, as a community council to get on and do that anyway. In terms of the coordination, so that your tie up nicely with the efforts of the authority. If it's in the Parks Department, then Phil Beeman would be the ideal person as the Parks Manager to make sure that, any planned schedule of works coincides nicely with the works that we already undertake.
Thanks for that. And
if it was weed spraying on the highway, it would be Jason Jenkins.
Could I suggest, thank you, Zach. Could I suggest then that you send a list to Councillor Green with those names so that we can pass them on to our clerk, because then we can start the process and start the ball rolling, if that be okay. He's not saying no, so I'm going to take that as a yes. Right, I've got a number.
Sorry, I just typed it in.
Yes, you did. I'm just seeing the screen's a little bit slow at the moment. All right, I've got a couple more people who want to speak on this. I've got obviously Councillor Keith Edwards, Councillor Altaf Hussain, Councillor Tim Thomas, and Councillor Nora Clark as a quick point. But we'll go, because he's been waiting so patiently, I'll go to Councillor Edwards, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Some mixed messages originally, which seem to have been cleared up. Janine gave a commitment to children's play areas. Zach Shell said we would be reducing the number of children's play areas. Subsequently, you seem to be in agreement now that we will be reducing the number of children's play areas. Can I ask when that exercise will take place, when the decisions will be made, and will town and community councils have time to evaluate and look at what they could potentially save? And secondly, the Newbridge Field issue relates very much with, or runs in line with, Mystic Welfare Park, and we have had some initial consultation with the company involved in looking at a way forward there. What we're not getting, and what is always the case with town community councils, is costings. Now, if there is a saving, how much is that saving? Because that saving reflects on the cost of running the asset. So you have said, Zach has said, that there is costings for every asset that we have. And if that is the case, can those costings be made available so we know exactly what we're up against when we enter into potential asset transfers? Because it's extremely difficult to get that information from the authority. And finally, a criticism. Yet again, we are faced with potential cuts after town and community councils have been asked to set their budgets. Surely we need to know what we are faced with prior to setting town and community council budgets, so that they can be looked at and possibly included in their budgets going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Did anyone want to come back on that? Janine, obviously, or Zach? Whomever?
Yes, I'm happy, Chair, to answer some of that, and I'm sure Zach will add to some of it as well. I think what's important to note here is that our commitment is that we will have great children's play across the borough. That is our commitment. What we do need to look at is look at the spaces that we've got and remove those, as I said earlier, that probably don't function as well as they do, but look at the impact of that on the borough and in the spaces and in the communities. That's critically important because we do want spaces for children to play, but also to recognise really that there are lots of different forms of play and not just equipped children's play. It's lots of children like open spaces, etc. So we need to look at the whole range, not just equipped children's play, although this is what is featured in some of this saving. So that's important, very important, and we share that as a council, don't we, the importance of that. We're undertaking that review now. We're doing that work with our cabinet member and with our teams, with Zach and the team. What we can do is when we get to a position where we understand which ones we think we'd like to review the future use of, then I'm sure we can have some conversations surrounding our narrative as to why we're making these decisions. I think that's important. With regard to the costings with CAT transfers, yeah, that's a critical part really about organisations and clubs taking on the ownership of areas, bowling greens, parks, playing fields. That's critical that they understand the full costing of what they're taking on, and that will be supplied as part of that CAT transfer and as part of the business case that they prepare for that CAT transfer. And maybe Zach might want to give you a little bit more information on that, but that, yes, is very important part of that. And then with regard to the town and community council's budgets, I think I'll probably defer to Jill to give an answer to that question. But if Zach, hopefully that will answer some of the questions that Councillor Edwards has, and if Zach would like to come in on any of those, then I would welcome that.
Yeah, I'll just come in on the CAT costings item. I'm a little surprised with the comment, to be honest, because we've obviously got a lot slicker with our CAT process and got many underway, and Guy Smith has been very good at supplying all of our CAT costings and getting them together in terms of, you know, what our utility costs are in different pavilions, etc., etc. So they can all be supplied, and indeed our costs for maintaining pitches, etc., has indeed. Actually, you know, I said I can't supply it right now when we had a question earlier, but it has been previously published. We've put it in some of the previous CAT reports, so we'll supply that information, you know, in due course very quickly.
Thank you very much for that, Zach. Now on to the Town Community Council.
Could I just come back in briefly, Chair?
Yeah, of course. I was going to bring Jill in first if you wanted. Or...
I'd very much like to see the overall costs of running Maestig Welfare Park. And I'm sure Councillor Walters would be very much like to see the overall costs of running Newbridge Fields. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure that's something Zach and Janine can provide for you and for Councillor Walters. I'm just going to assume saying yeah.
Yes, no problem, Chair. That's something we can provide. Yeah.
All right. Jill, you wanted to come in? Did you want to come in on the Town and Community Council budgets or?
Only just to say, Chair, through you, that there's obviously a timetabling issue, which I think is a conundrum that we've never really solved in terms of timing. As you know, we got our draft settlement on the 22nd of December, and so in many respects, we're not in a position to provide draft budgets until we get that settlement. However, if town and community councils work in advance with Zach about what they want to do, then obviously it's incumbent on them to set the precept accordingly. So that it isn't necessarily dependent on the council's budget. So I think the difficulty we have is that if town and community councils raise the precept to do the work that has been removed as a saving in the MTFS, then the resident is still paying the same amount in council tax. So I just want to raise that, because regardless of who does what. If it costs, it's still going to cost the resident.
Thank you, Joe. That's a very pertinent point about that the resident will still have to pay no matter who provides the service, but still something we should look at going forward. Councillor Lynn Walters.
Yeah, and this is really building on exactly what Councillor Voisey was saying for the town council on Newbridge Fields, and I'm sure it's going to be the same up in my stake, where we have these big community spaces. So for Newbridge Fields and my stake park, that if it goes into a town council at all, our precept will go up, and the difference is, rather than the costs of these huge community spaces being used, which are used by everybody across the whole borough, the costs go on to a few wards, and that is manifestly unfair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. Right, I've got Councillor Hussain. You had a question, which seems a very long time ago now.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, it's about the closure of these playing areas. Two things are important we need to know. That obesity and related health issues are very high in Wales, and that too in Bridgend, especially among 4 to 5-year-old young children. In addition, I think no parent would like to see outliving their children, you see. So we need these playing areas. My suggestion, humble suggestion, would be that before closure of these areas, you need to do a survey among the local residents and see what they want. That is a humble suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone wants to come back on that.
I have requested to speak, Chair.
You have, Councillor Davis, and I have you down after Councillor Tim Thomas.
Okay.
You're not lost on my list on this.
All right.
It's just a very long list. Janine, did you want to come back on?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, of course, that's something we could consider when we're looking at these areas. Yeah, absolutely. We'll consider that.
Oh, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tim Thomas now.
Chair, I think Councillor Thomas's computer is restarting. I've just had a message off him.
All right, no worries. If he comes back in, we'll see where we're at. Councillor Pam Davis, I did say you're on my list, and here you are.
Hi, thank you very much. I don't know about a review locally. If we go back to 2019, the Welsh Assembly government carried out a survey then, and in there it stipulated that no one on any estate should be more than 500 metres from a playground or a play area. So perhaps we need to dig that report out and have a look at that. And if we go by that, we won't be losing any playgrounds and play areas. In fact, you know, if we had the money, we should be actually, we're told about healthy living, etc., and open spaces. We should be making more if possible. But that's obviously within budget constraints. Thank you very much, Chair.
No worries. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Janine, did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Davis. This is a very good point, actually, and that's something that we will surely be considering when we're doing this review. Thank you. A very good point.
Thanks for that. Okay, that's all I've got for Com 1. So we're going to move on now, unless anyone quickly comes in. Nope. Okay. Com 2 then. Councillor Jane Gebby, I have you having a question.
I don't know. Are you waiting for Tim first, Chair?
I don't. Is Tim back? I don't know. Is he back in? I haven't seen him.
No, not yet. No.
Right, okay.
Okay.
I'll carry on then. I'm very conscious of the time and the diary appointments that we all have in them today. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm really concerned about the relocation of the community recycling centre to Pyle. Not so much about the relocation, but the lack of engagement with specifically the school that adjoins it in relation to the land. And also, when the consultation was undertaken with local members, we were informed at the time that all access would be taken via the A48. As everybody is aware, Pyle and Kenwick Hill has significant issues with traffic, specifically around the industrial estate, specifically around the garden centre, All of it is adjoining, and it's going to be a rat run. So if we are waiting for serious injuries and potentially life-threatening injuries, then I really do think we need to actually look at that. But I'm concerned that even the school wasn't consulted with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Gebby. Before I take this to officers, Councillor Nora Clark has a very similar question, so take them both at the same time, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in on the back of Councillor Gebby, really, and share my concerns, really, about that particular area, especially along Mostyn Road, or, you know, as you enter the estate there, because it doesn't matter how many times you're down there, traffic speeds. I don't know what it is on that estate, but they certainly do speed. They're not, you know, going at a normal 30 miles an hour. They are really going it along there. So I do hope, obviously I haven't seen the brief or anything like that, I do hope that the speed limit will be reduced on that site there.
Okay, thank you for that. Janine, do you want to come in?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Chair. Yes, a couple of things really. I'll pick up on the speeding cars. I mean, that is something that we will look to address on that estate. There is a lot of traffic movement that comes in and out that garden centre and the estate, and there are some transport works, some traffic works, management works being undertaken to improve that junction, and that's an important part of the recycling centre relocation. I mean, I'm going to bring Zach in shortly to give you a bit more detail. So as part of that, we want to look at improving that junction to allow traffic to be managed in a more effective way, and also to look at the speed by which traffic moves through the site. This is all about more efficient use of that pile centre. It's about ensuring that we can improve our recycling rates. It's about sustainability going forward, really. That's the whole thing with the relocation. I'm afraid I can't comment on the consultation that was undertaken because I wasn't here at that point, but I will let Zach come in now and maybe he can comment on that, Chair. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, on the very specific point about the school, I couldn't comment myself, but I mean, generally, because we're obviously way past the point of this being an idea now, full planning permission has been granted, you know, and all of the appropriate legal processes that we had to go through in order to create the site at this location were undertaken at the time. And obviously there are, you know, various requirements along the way with all of the statutory consultees, etc., as part of the process. But obviously we're way past that now. We're constructing this site. We've also tendered the works on the junction and just recently had prices back for the improvement works. So this is something that is in train, hence why it's a green saving evidenced on the MTFS proposal there, as this site is being constructed as we speak. And you know, in terms of the consultation period, we can, you know, certainly go back and sort of, Councillor Gebby, confirm exactly what was done back at the time, you know, quite a while back now. But certainly that is historical in terms of, you know, we're past that stage, and planning permission was granted quite some time ago.
Thank you very much for your comments, both. However, I sat at a meeting last night. I hope you are all expecting significant public unrest because everybody is up in arms that they will not consulted with. There is no way that the traffic calming proposals that you are suggesting is going to work. And furthermore, all of this is being done to save £60,000 worth of money. And I'm really sorry, the actual engagement has not been good. And part of the consultation, because I was consulted with as a local member, and that was my suggestion at the time, is that they needed to go through the A48. So it's already in the press. We've already been told to expect long delays all around the industrial estate, but it might be interesting to note all those delays are going to have significant effects on the residential area that adjoins it.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Gabby. I'm sure that's something more of a comment than a question, but something that we can, something that the officers will address when those comments and come to fruition.
One thing, if I could
yeah,
add, Chair, just one point. You know, and I appreciate the concerns about congestion. You know, with any CRC site, you know, the potential for congestion, you know, exists obviously, and hence the reason for the works at the junction as well. But one comment Councillor Gebby made, you know, is it all for a £60,000 saving? To be clear, it's not just for a £60,000 saving. It's also for an improved facility compared to what we currently have in Stormy Down. We have no reuse shop on that site in Stormy Down, and there's no room for one. This site will also have a reuse shop, which will improve not just recycling, but reuse facilities. We currently only have one in my Steg on the CRC site there. So we will have a better site as well, you know, which will be to the benefit of the users of the site. So I'd just like to add that point.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Consequently, more traffic.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, Councillor Tim Thomas, you're back with us. I know you had to restart. Do you remember your comment from Com 1?
Com 1? Oh,
yeah, the first one, the first proposal. You said you had a quick point.
Quick, I don't know if it related to that. I've completely lost the point. I've lost large chunks of the meeting because of some IT failures. So apologies if I'm duplicating a little bit here. But I wanted to make 2 points on grass cutting and 1 on children's play areas. And I think Councillor Keith Edwards was going on to this point. He may have made the point because that's the point where I cut off. I just like some reassurance, really, that if there was going to be cuts to play areas, individual play areas, there would be some sort of consultation to individual play areas, because I can think of some that are quite not that widely used, but there could be quite a negative impact if they were closed. So I just like some reassurance that there'd be some meaningful consultation for play areas. Second point I wanted to make about grass cutting, I just wondered what if there's cuts to grass cutting, is there any impact to the grass cutting of council-owned cemeteries? Because with the current inclement weather, I am getting a bit of feedback that some of our graveyards and cemeteries are a bit boggy, and you know, I just wondered what impact that could have. Final point, and that is I'm a little bit concerned about if grass cutting moved to town and community councils, and the impact an uncoordinated approach could have on our wildlife and ecosystems. I just hope that if any town and community councils did take this service on, there would be advice given on the impact of, perhaps should we say, overzealous grass cutting could have on our bee and wildlife populations. Might sound a frivolous point to some, but it is, of course, very important to our ecosystems.
You're very correct indeed. It is very important to our ecosystem. Janine, did you want to come back quickly? I know we discussed it a little bit before, but just for Councillor Thomas.
Yes, I'm aware that we have run out of time now, Chair, so I'll be very brief. Yes, we have committed, Councillor Thomas, to speaking, to looking at across the children's play, making sure we mitigate any real excessive community impact. I would say I don't think any children's play would have no community impact, but I think that it would be prudent to have those conversations with the community as and when we reach those decisions. That's something we've committed to. With regard to the grass cutting, I'll let Zach give you a very brief answer on that, if I may.
Okay, just briefly on the grass cutting, because I think the part about town and community councils we'd largely covered it earlier in the meeting. But yeah, certainly in terms of the overzealous grass cutting, we certainly don't envisage that being an issue. We don't intend for any areas that are regularly cut to be cut more frequently, or if they are, they're certainly not areas that are so unkempt that they lend to, ecology and wildlife, living in them, etc., etc. We are talking about open space grass, regularly cut grassed areas that town and community councils may decide to give a more frequent cut to, but only where we've previously reduced our level of cutting, and so it gets a little bit unkempt in between. Where we also choose to not cut the grass going forward, then obviously we will be creating more naturalized areas, which will actually be an improvement from an ecology perspective. Whilst the visual aspect may change, it'll be something that some individuals will like and possibly others not, but it will be a improvement from an ecology perspective. And the final point was just on the cemeteries. The cut to the grass cutting budget is for the open space grass cutting, not the cemeteries budget, so that will not be affected. We're not talking about varying the number of cuts within the cemeteries.
Thanks very much for that, Zach. I think I answered all your questions, didn't you, Councillor Thomas?
Yes, thanks.
Chair, could I speak a moment? It's Meryl.
Of course you can, Meryl.
There appears to be a briefing that's just about to start, which officers and members are leaving for. We may be in a position where we no longer core it, and we'll also maybe losing our officers who need to answer questions. Could we consider perhaps moving the rest of the questions on communities to the end of the session tomorrow, perhaps? I don't know how people feel about that, because we are going to time out shortly if we have less than the required number of people to continue.
I'm happy to propose that, Chair, if that's
There is only 4 questions I have written down, so happy to add this at the end of the meeting. I'm not sure what we're going to do about. I'm assuming then we'll do recommendations tomorrow as well. Then
at the end of tomorrow, I think, because we're losing everyone. We weren't aware of the briefing that's been put in the diaries after this meeting has been arranged.
I think, Meryl, we just need to make sure that everybody that would be here today is also in attendance tomorrow, because they haven't necessarily been invited to that session, just so you're aware.
No, we would have to send the necessary invitations. And can I just ask, Janine, are you available to come to the meeting tomorrow?
Yes, I think I've got it in my diary. Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know if the cabinet members are still here for communities.
I'm here. I'm just checking my diary now.
Because I take it that you're leaving shortly, Janine, and cabinet member, are you?
I'm still here, but I don't know what to do. I think I ought to be at the other briefing, so it's not very good timetabling, to be honest.
Yes, I'm as surprised as you are, Councillor Smith, that this has been timetabled after this has quite carefully been put in.
Can I just say that the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee is actually timetabled in my, for tomorrow that is actually timetabled in my calendar. Would we have to attend from the beginning, or will you send?
No, I think we could call you as we are nearing the end, because you've got two. Well, the difficulty with moving you to the beginning was that everybody's there waiting for you to finish. So I was going to suggest we call you towards the end of the session and let you know on standby if that was acceptable.
No, that's fine. So I'm assuming you send us a timed invitation.
Yes. Well, we'll send you the invitation, but we'll have to it'll be the same appointment as everybody else, but we'll have to email you to give you notice.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. As long as you're not put into it, Meryl.
Sorry about this. As I say, we were not aware of this other.
I will add though that tomorrow there is planning in the afternoon, so we might have to be pretty quick. It is at 2:30, I think. So.
John Paul, is it all right if I drop out of this meeting?
Yes, of course.
I've got a nasty feeling I might even have been asked to chair the other one, but I've forgotten. But I'm hoping,
we'll go on then.
Fingers crossed, that's not the case.
I'll let you off this time.
Right. We still have 25 participants, so I'm just checking out. Does Janine and Councillor Young need to leave?
Well, I would like to be at the other meeting, please, because it's. Has an impact on my directorate. Yes.
Chair, can I move that we finish the meeting and reconvene tomorrow? I think because I'd like to go to the meeting, but as well, and I think a lot of members would. We could come back tomorrow. I'd like to propose that.
Yeah, no, I've got you down. We were just chatting in between. I've got you down for that, Councillor. Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Lewis, Janice Lewis, we'll bring your question on cemeteries tomorrow. Is that okay?
He's trying to get back in, I think, isn't he?
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll bring.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, and apologies for that scheduling.
Oh, it's okay.
So
These things
I'll
happen.
leave now,
postpone
Chair.
this meeting until tomorrow.
Okay, thank